The stagecoach lurched to a stop, and Cordelia Vance tasted blood. She'd bitten her tongue somewhere around the last brutal turn when the wheels hit a rut deep enough to crack bone. Her carpetbag slammed into her ribs. The woman beside her, a prospector's wife with a face like dried leather, didn't even blink. This was the West. Pain was expected. "Red Hollow!" the driver shouted, his voice scraped raw from dust. Cordelia pressed her face to the window. What she saw didn't match the letters. The town sprawled across a valley like something half-built and half-abandoned. Wooden buildings leaned into each other for support. A saloon, a general store with boards missing from its sign, a church with a crooked steeple that looked like it might collapse in the next strong wind, mud streets churned by wagon wheels and horse hooves. And beyond it all, rising like a dark promise against the mountains, stood the largest structure she'd ever seen outside of Boston, the Thorne Estate. It wasn't a ranch house. It was a compound, stone walls, iron gates, chimneys pumping smoke into an already gray sky. Even from a distance, it looked less like a home and more like something designed to keep people out, or in. "That where you're headed?" the prospector's wife asked, following her gaze. Cordelia nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The woman made a sound that could have meant anything. "Good luck with that." Before Cordelia could ask what she meant, the door swung open. The driver's face appeared, weathered and impatient. "Miss Vance, your husband sent someone." Husband. The word still felt foreign in her mouth, even though she'd been practicing it for weeks. She hadn't married Elias Thorne yet. That ceremony was supposed to happen tonight, but the letters had been signed, the agreement made. In the eyes of the law and practicality, she already belonged to him. She gathered her bag and stepped down into ankle-deep mud. The man waiting for her wasn't what she expected either. He was young, maybe 25, with a face too pretty for this kind of country. Clean-shaven, pressed clothes, a gun belt that looked more decorative than functional. "Miss Vance." He removed his hat with a flourish that felt rehearsed. "I'm Marcus Webb. Mr. Thorne sent me to escort you to the house." She wanted to ask why Elias himself hadn't come, why her future husband couldn't be bothered to meet the woman traveling across a continent to marry him. But she'd learned early that questions like that made you look desperate, and desperation was blood in the water. "Thank you, Mr. Webb." "Just Marcus, please." His smile was easy, practiced. "We don't stand much on formality out here." Liar, she thought. Everything about him screamed formality, the way he held himself, the deliberate charm. Even the horse waiting behind him, a sleek black mare that had no business in a working ranch. She let him help her into the saddle of a second horse, a roan gelding that looked far more practical. Her legs ached from days in the coach, and the shift to horseback made her muscles scream protest, but she kept her face blank. She'd spent 26 years learning how to hide what she felt. It was the only skill her mother ever taught her that proved useful. They rode through town in silence. People watched from doorways and windows. A few nodded at Marcus. None of them looked at her directly, but she felt their attention like fingers on her spine, measuring, judging, wondering how long she'd last. "How was your journey?" Marcus asked, his tone suggesting he didn't actually care. "Long, I imagine. Boston to here, that's quite a distance." "You know where I'm from." Mr. Thorne mentioned it. He glanced at her sidelong. "Said you came from good family. Educated, well-bred?" The words made her jaw tighten. She'd heard versions of that her whole life. Good family meant her father had been a lawyer before the drink took him. Educated meant she could read Latin and balance accounts. Well-bred meant she knew which fork to use at dinner, right up until there was no dinner to eat. "Mr. Thorne's letters didn't mention much about him," she said instead. "No, I suppose they wouldn't." Marcus's smile flickered. "He's a private man. And successful, from what I can see. Very successful." "Doing what exactly?" "His letters mentioned cattle, but land," Marcus cut in smoothly. "The Thornes own most of what you can see from here to the eastern ridge. Cattle, yes. Timber, water rights, mining claims. They've built something remarkable. Built, not earned, not inherited." Built suggested construction, effort, intention. It also suggested that what was here now hadn't always been. They passed through the iron gates, which stood open but looked capable of withstanding a siege. Up close, the estate was even more imposing. The main house was 3 stories of dark stone and heavy timber, with narrow windows that looked like eyes. Outbuildings scattered across the property, stables, a bunkhouse, storage sheds, something that might have been a smokehouse. Men worked in the yards, but they stopped when the horses approached. Watching. Always watching. Marcus dismounted and offered his hand. She took it, letting him help her down, and immediately felt the wrongness of the place settle over her like a wet coat. Too quiet. That was the first thing. A property this size should have been loud with work. Hammers, saws, animals, voices. Instead, everything felt muffled, as if the air itself was holding its breath. "Mr. Thorne is waiting inside," Marcus said. "I'll have someone take your bag." "I can manage?" "I insist." It wasn't a suggestion. She released the bag to a ranch hand who appeared from nowhere, a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and eyes that didn't blink enough. The front door opened before they reached it. The woman standing there was maybe 50, dressed in black with gray hair pulled back so tight it must have hurt. Her face had the kind of hardness that came from years of enforcing rules nobody else wanted to follow. "Mrs. Hale," Marcus said. "This is Miss Vance." "I know who she is." Mrs. Hale's voice could have stripped paint. She looked Cordelia up and down with the efficiency of a livestock appraiser. "You're late." "The stage was delayed," Cordelia said evenly. "Weather in the passes." "Mr. Thorne doesn't care about weather. He cares about punctuality." Mrs. Hale stepped aside. "Inside, quickly. We have work to do before tonight." Cordelia crossed the threshold into a house that felt more like a mausoleum. The entrance hall was massive. Dark wood floors, darker walls, a staircase that climbed into shadows. Portraits lined the walls, stern-faced men and grim women who all shared the same hard eyes. Thorne ancestors, presumably. A family tree rooted in stone. "This way," Mrs. Hale said, already moving. "You'll bathe first. Then we'll see about making you presentable." Making her presentable, as if she were livestock being prepared for auction. They climbed the stairs, Marcus trailing behind. The second floor was a maze of hallways lined with closed doors. Mrs. Hale navigated without hesitation, her keys jangling at her waist like a jailer's. "This is your room," she said, opening a door near the end of the hall. "You'll stay here until after the ceremony, then—" She paused. "Well, that depends on Mr. Thorne." The room was larger than anywhere Cordelia had lived in the past 5 years. 4-poster bed, wardrobe, vanity. A window that looked out over the western pastures where the sun was starting its descent toward the mountains. Everything was clean, expensive, and utterly impersonal. "Bathwater's being drawn now," Mrs. Hale continued. "You have 1 hour. The ceremony begins at 8. Don't be late again." She left without waiting for acknowledgement, her footsteps retreating down the hall like a countdown. Marcus lingered in the doorway. "She's not as harsh as she seems." "Isn't she?" His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Red Hollow isn't Boston, Miss Vance. Things work differently here. The sooner you understand that, the easier this will be." "Easier for whom?" He actually laughed at that. "You've got spine. That's good. You'll need it." Then he was gone too, closing the door behind him. Cordelia stood alone in a stranger's house, in a stranger's room, about to marry a stranger for reasons that had stopped making sense somewhere around Kansas. She told herself it was practical. She was 26, unmarried, with no prospects and no money. Her father's debts had consumed everything. The boarding house where she'd been living was raising rates she couldn't afford. When the marriage broker showed her Elias Thorne's letter, successful rancher seeking educated wife, willing to pay passage and provide security, it had seemed like providence. Now it felt like something else entirely. She moved to the window. From here, she could see the town below, small and insignificant against the vastness of the land. Beyond it, mountains rose like teeth. This was the frontier, the edge of everything, the kind of place where people came to disappear. A knock at the door made her turn. "Bath's ready, miss." A young woman entered carrying linens, her face carefully neutral. She couldn't have been more than 18. "Mrs. Hale says I'm to help you prepare." "What's your name?" The girl hesitated as if the question was a trap. Annie, miss. Thank you, Annie. Cordelia kept her voice gentle. I can manage the bath myself, but I'd appreciate help with the dress later. Annie's shoulders dropped slightly, tension releasing. Yes, miss? I'll wait outside. No need to wait. Just come back in 45 minutes. Mrs. Hale said, Mrs. Hale doesn't need to know everything. Cordelia offered a small smile. Does she? Annie's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. No, miss. I suppose she doesn't. The bath was already cooling by the time Cordelia lowered herself into it, but she didn't care. She needed the water, needed the moment alone to think. The tub was copper, expensive, out of place in a ranch house. Everything here was out of place. Too fine, too deliberate, too much like something built to impress rather than to live in. She scrubbed at 2 weeks of travel grime and tried not to think about what came next. Marriage to a man she'd never met. A wedding night with a stranger. A life in this enormous, silent house where everyone moved like they were walking on ice that might crack. The water turned gray. She stayed in it anyway. When Annie returned, she brought a dress that made Cordelia's stomach drop. It was beautiful. Ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. The kind of dress that cost more than Cordelia had earned in a year of teaching at the girls' school. The kind of dress that said, "You belong to something important now." Mr. Thorne had it made special, Annie said quietly, laying it across the bed. From measurements in your letter. Cordelia had sent her measurements 3 months ago, never imagining they'd be used for this. The dress fit perfectly, of course. It hugged her waist, emphasized curves she usually tried to hide, made her look like something valuable. Annie worked her hair into an elaborate twist, pinning it with combs that had tiny pearls embedded in them. When she was finished, Cordelia barely recognized herself in the mirror. "You look lovely, miss," Annie said. "I look expensive." Annie's hand stilled. "Is that bad?" "I don't know yet." A clock somewhere in the house chimed 7:30. 30 minutes until the ceremony. 30 minutes until her life changed irrevocably. "Annie," Cordelia said carefully, "the woman who was here before me." Annie's face went blank so fast it was like watching shutters slam closed. "I don't know what you mean, miss." "The previous bride, there was one, wasn't there? Mr. Thorne mentioned—" "I really don't know anything about that." Annie gathered up the discarded travel clothes too quickly, fumbling them. "Mrs. Hale will be here soon to take you downstairs. Best be ready." She fled before Cordelia could press further. So there had been someone else. And whatever happened to her, it was bad enough that even the servants wouldn't speak of it. Mrs. Hale arrived exactly at 8, her face set in lines of permanent disapproval. "Come, Mr. Thorne is waiting." They descended the stairs into what looked like controlled chaos. The main hall had been transformed, candles everywhere, their light making the shadows dance. Flowers, where had they gotten flowers? Arranged in vases that probably cost more than Cordelia's entire wardrobe back in Boston. And people, maybe 30 of them, all dressed in their finest, all watching the staircase with expressions ranging from curiosity to something that looked uncomfortably like pity. At the far end of the hall, beneath a massive portrait of a man who looked like he'd murdered his way to prosperity, stood Elias Thorne. He was nothing like his letters suggested. The correspondents had painted a picture of a hard-working rancher, maybe rough around the edges, probably weathered by sun and work. The man waiting for her looked like he'd never touched a rope or branded a cow in his life. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and darker eyes, handsome in a way that was almost aggressive, well-dressed in a suit that probably came from San Francisco or even further, and young. He couldn't have been more than 35, but it was his expression that made her falter on the stairs. He wasn't looking at her like a groom seeing his bride. He was looking at her like a man checking a horse for defects before purchase. Mrs. Hale's hand on her elbow kept her moving forward, one step, another. The room had gone silent, all those eyes tracking her progress. She kept her spine straight, her chin up, her face composed. Whatever they saw when they looked at her, she wouldn't give them weakness. The minister was elderly, with a Bible so worn the leather was coming apart in his hands. He nodded at Cordelia with something that might have been sympathy, then began speaking in a voice that had presided over too many burials. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here." The words washed over her like water. She heard them without processing them, her entire focus on the man standing beside her. Elias hadn't spoken yet, hadn't acknowledged her directly. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight, as if this whole ceremony was something to be endured rather than celebrated. "Do you, Elias Thorne, take this woman?" "I do." Flat, emotionless. The same tone someone might use to confirm a business transaction. "And do you, Cordelia Vance, take this man?" This was it. The moment everything changed. She could say no, could turn and walk out of this house, this town, this life. Could face poverty and uncertainty and hunger, but at least face it on her own terms. She looked at Elias, really looked at him, and saw something flicker in his eyes. Not love, not even warmth, but something like resignation, as if he was trapped in this too. "I do," she heard herself say. The minister pronounced them married. No kiss, no celebration, just a curt nod from Elias, and then he was turning away, addressing the room. "Thank you all for coming. Drinks are in the dining room." That was it. Her wedding. Less ceremony than a livestock sale. The crowd began to disperse, moving toward food and alcohol with the enthusiasm of people grateful to have something else to do. Cordelia stood frozen until Elias's hand closed around her elbow. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "Upstairs, now." Warning bells screamed in her head. "The guests can wait." His grip tightened, not painful, but insistent. "Please." That last word, soft and urgent, made her follow. They climbed the stairs, leaving behind the murmur of confused guests. He led her past her room, past several closed doors, to what must have been his study. He opened it, gestured her inside, then locked the door behind them. The room was pure function. Desk, maps on the walls, filing cabinets, a gun cabinet in the corner with enough weapons to outfit a small militia. "I need you to listen very carefully," Elias said, moving to the window and pulling the curtain aside. "And I need you not to panic. You're making that difficult. There are men outside." He pointed. "See them? 3 on the ridge, 2 more by the eastern fence. They've been there since morning." She looked where he indicated. In the fading light, she could just make out shapes that might have been riders. "Who are they?" "Calder Rourke's men." "And who is my enemy?" Elias let the curtain drop and turned to face her. "Your arrival accelerated things. They've been waiting for this." "For what? A wedding? For me to have something they can use against me." His expression was grim. "A wife changes the mathematics of violence, Miss Vance. A man alone can take risks. A man with a wife has vulnerabilities." The room felt suddenly smaller. "You're saying I'm a target." "I'm saying you became one the moment you agreed to marry me." Rage cut through her fear like a blade. "You knew this. Before you sent those letters, before you offered marriage, you knew I'd be in danger." "Yes, at least he didn't lie." "Then why?" "Because I needed you here." He moved to the desk, pulled out a drawer, and extracted a leather folder. "And because you needed a way out of Boston. Don't pretend that marriage broker found you by accident. I paid him to look for someone specific, educated, desperate enough to come west, smart enough to be useful." "Useful for what?" He opened the folder and spread its contents across the desk. Papers, maps, photographs, what looked like land deeds and legal documents. "Calder Rourke has been trying to destroy my family for 15 years, Elias said. "He claims my father stole land from his father, started a range war that killed a dozen men, and he's not entirely wrong." Cordelia looked at the papers without touching them. "So give him the land." "It's not about land anymore, it's about blood." Elias's voice carried the weight of old exhaustion. "My father did things, terrible things, to build this empire. Rourke wants restitution, wants me ruined, broken, preferably dead. And he's been systematically dismantling everything I have, driving off my workers, sabotaging my herds, buying out my debts, turning the town against me. And somehow I'm supposed to help with this? You're supposed to give me legitimacy." He met her eyes. A married man looks stable, settled, less like a dynasty ending and more like one beginning. That matters to banks, to investors, to the territorial government. Your presence here makes me look less like what I am. Which is? The last thorn. He said it like a confession. My father's dead, my brother's dead. It's just me now, trying to hold on to something built on violence, and Rourke knows it. One more push and it all falls apart. Somewhere downstairs, glass shattered. They both froze. Then voices, raised in anger, a woman screaming, the unmistakable sound of the front door slamming open so hard the whole house shook. Elias moved to the gun cabinet, his hand steady. Stay behind me. What's happening? They're coming inside. He loaded a revolver with practiced efficiency. I'd hoped they'd wait until morning, but footsteps thundered up the stairs. Multiple people, moving fast. The study door shook under someone's fist. Thorne! We know you're in there! Elias positioned himself between Cordelia and the door, gun raised. His face had gone completely blank, as if he'd pulled on a mask. This is private property, Rourke. This is a crime scene. The voice on the other side was rough, angry, barely controlled. And you're going to open this door, or we're going to break it down. On what authority? On the authority of a federal warrant and 2 U.S. marshals standing right here who'd be happy to add resisting arrest to your list of charges. Federal warrant. Marshals. Cordelia's mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant. Elias's hand tightened on the gun. For a moment she thought he might actually try to fight. Then his shoulders dropped, just slightly, and he lowered the weapon. I need to see the warrant. Open the door first. Show me the warrant, and I'll cooperate peacefully. Otherwise, you can try that battering ram and see how many of your men I take down before you reach me. Silence. Then paper slid under the door. Elias bent, keeping the gun trained on the entrance, and picked it up. He scanned it quickly, and something in his face changed. Not fear, something worse. Defeat. It's real, he said quietly. They're really here. For what? Cordelia demanded. What are you accused of? He looked at her then, and she saw the truth in his eyes before he said it. Murder. He unlocked the door and stepped back. They came in like a flood. 6 men, all armed. 2 wore marshal badges. The rest looked like hired guns trying to look official. And leading them was a man who could only be Calder Rourke. He was older than Elias, maybe 50, with silver threading through dark hair and a face that had seen too much sun and too much violence. He moved like someone accustomed to command, his eyes sweeping the room and cataloging everything in seconds. Elias Thorne, one of the marshals said, you're under arrest for the murder of Sarah Whitmore. The name hit Cordelia like a fist. Sarah Whitmore, the previous bride. That's a lie, Elias said, but there was no conviction in it. Rourke smiled without humor. Is it? Because we just found her body, buried on your property, under the floorboards of the eastern bunkhouse, right where our informant said it would be. What informant? Elias's voice had gone dangerous. Who? Someone who got tired of covering for you? Rourke's gaze shifted to Cordelia. And you must be the new Mrs. Thorne. My condolences. You married a murderer. The marshals moved in, producing iron manacles. Elias didn't resist. He stood there, arms out, and let them clap the restraints on his wrists like he'd been expecting this all along. I didn't kill her, he said to Cordelia, not to them. Whatever they found, whatever they think they know, I didn't kill Sarah Whitmore. But you know who did, Rourke said. It wasn't a question. Elias said nothing. They hauled him toward the door. One of the marshals tipped his hat at Cordelia. Ma'am, you'll need to come down to the station tomorrow. We'll have questions. Then they were gone, dragging her husband of less than an hour out of the house and into the night. Cordelia stood alone in the study, surrounded by evidence of crime she didn't understand, in a house that felt like it was holding its breath. From somewhere below she heard Mrs. Hale's voice, sharp and commanding, trying to restore order among the guests who must have witnessed everything. And outside, in the darkness, those riders still waited on the ridge. She moved to the window. Her reflection stared back at her, a woman in an expensive wedding dress, hair still perfectly arranged, face carefully composed, but her hands were shaking. They'd arrested Elias for murdering the woman who came before her, the woman who traveled west to marry into this family and ended up buried under a bunkhouse floor. And now Cordelia stood exactly where Sarah Whitmore must have stood, in this house, with these people, surrounded by secrets and violence. The question wasn't whether she was in danger. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to escape. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass and made herself breathe. In, out, in, out. Then she turned and looked at the papers still spread across Elias's desk. If she was going to survive this, she needed to understand it. Needed to know who killed Sarah Whitmore and why. Needed to know if her new husband was a murderer or just a man drowning in his father's sins. Needed to know if this house full of secrets would become her grave too. Outside, thunder rumbled across the mountains. The storm was coming. Cordelia's hands moved through the papers on Elias's desk before her mind fully registered what she was doing. Land deeds, survey maps, correspondence dating back 15 years. A photograph of a man who looked like an older, harder version of Elias, his father, presumably, standing with a group of armed men in front of what looked like a burned-out homestead. She shouldn't be doing this. This was evidence. This was private. This was... The door opened without warning. She spun around, heart hammering, and found herself facing Marcus Webb. He'd lost the easy charm from earlier. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "You need to come downstairs," he said. "Now." I know what you were doing." He crossed the room in 3 strides and began gathering the papers, shoving them back into the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. "And you need to stop, right now." "If Elias is innocent doesn't matter out here." Marcus slammed the drawer shut. "What matters is staying alive long enough to prove it. And poking around in things you don't understand is a good way to end up like Sarah Whitmore." The name hung between them like smoke. "Tell me about her," Cordelia said. "No. I'm already involved. I'm married to him. I deserve to know. You deserve exactly nothing." Marcus's voice cracked like a whip. "You came here for money and security. You got a name and a house. That's the transaction. Everything else is above your pay grade." She should have been angry, should have thrown his condescension back in his face, but something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't being cruel. He was terrified. "Who was she?" Cordelia asked quietly. "Sarah Whitmore." Who was she really? Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then his shoulders sagged, and he looked suddenly exhausted. "She was someone who asked too many questions, like you're doing right now." "Marcus, she came here 18 months ago. Same arrangement as you. Marriage broker, desperate circumstances, cross-country journey. Elias needed a wife to shore up his reputation. She needed an escape from whatever mess she'd left behind. He moved to the window, peering through the curtain at the darkness outside. Only she wasn't what she claimed to be." "What do you mean?" "I mean she was investigating him. Us. All of it." Marcus let the curtain drop. "She was Pinkerton, working undercover to build a case about land fraud and murder. And when we found out, she disappeared." The room felt like it was tilting. Did Elias kill her? I don't know. And that, Cordelia realized, was the truth. Marcus genuinely didn't know. Maybe. Maybe someone else did. Maybe she's not even dead and this is all some elaborate frame job. But what I do know is that body they found tonight has been in the ground for over a year, and whoever put it there isn't going to be happy about it coming back up. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Multiple people, moving with purpose. Marcus grabbed Cordelia's arm. "Listen to me very carefully. Downstairs, there are people who've been waiting for an excuse to tear this house apart. Federal agents. Rourke's men pretending to help with the investigation. Half the town hoping to see the thorns finally fall. You go down there looking scared or guilty, and they will eat you alive." "I am scared." "Then lie better." He steered her toward the door. "You're the grieving bride whose husband was just arrested on her wedding night. You're confused. You're overwhelmed. You know nothing about anything. Can you do that?" She'd been doing it her whole life. They descended the stairs into chaos. The main hall had transformed from a wedding venue into something that looked like the aftermath of a riot. Candles knocked over, flowers trampled. The guests had mostly fled, but those who remained clustered in nervous groups, their voices a low buzz of speculation and barely concealed excitement. Mrs. Hale stood near the entrance like a general surveying a battlefield, barking orders at the remaining staff. When she saw Cordelia, her expression flickered, something that might have been concern, quickly buried. "Mrs. Thorne." The title felt wrong in her mouth. "You should retire to your room. This is no place for—" "This is exactly the place for me." Cordelia kept her voice level. This is my home now. These are my guests. Your guests are vultures. Mrs. Hale's voice dropped. And you're bleeding. Two men in suits approached before Cordelia could respond. Federal agents, based on their bearing and the badges they carried. The older one had gray threading through his hair and eyes that had seen too much. The younger looked barely old enough to shave. Mrs. Thorne, the older agent said. I'm Agent Harrison. This is Agent Cole. We need to ask you some questions. My husband was just arrested. I think I'm entitled to some answers first. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Not many people pushed back, apparently. Fair enough. What would you like to know? Why you think he killed someone he claims he never met? We don't think, ma'am. We have evidence. A body buried on his property. Forensic analysis placing time of death around 18 months ago. Testimony from multiple witnesses placing the deceased on this property days before she vanished. Testimony from whom? I'm not at liberty to... Testimony from Calder Rourke and his people? Cordelia pressed. From men who've been trying to destroy my husband's family for years? That's your evidence? Agent Cole stepped forward, his youth making him eager. We also have financial records showing your husband made large cash withdrawals around the time of the disappearance. Hotel records placing him in Denver when he claimed to be here, and a witness who saw him arguing with Miss Whitmore the night she died. Who's the witness? Someone from inside this house. Harrison's expression remained neutral. Someone who finally decided that protecting a murderer wasn't worth the weight on their conscience. Cordelia felt the room shift beneath her feet. Someone from inside the house. One of the people standing in this hall right now, or cowering in their rooms upstairs, had turned on Elias, had given testimony that put him in chains. She looked around, trying to see guilt in faces that all carried their own secrets. Marcus stood near the stairs, his expression carefully blank. Mrs. Hale had gone rigid, her hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Annie peered from the kitchen doorway, eyes wide and frightened. Any of them could be the informant. All of them could be lying. I'd like to see my husband, Cordelia said. That's not possible tonight, Harrison replied. He's being held at the marshal's office pending arraignment. You can visit tomorrow after you've answered our questions. Then ask them. They moved to the dining room, which had been set up for the wedding reception that never happened, plates of untouched food, wine bottles opened but barely poured. Harrison pulled out a chair for Cordelia with unexpected courtesy, then sat across from her while Cole positioned himself by the door, keeping watch, or blocking escape. How much did your husband tell you about Sarah Whitmore? Harrison began. Nothing. I didn't know she existed until tonight. Did he mention any previous engagements? Other women who'd come to Red Hollow? No. What about his business dealings? Any mention of land disputes or conflicts with neighbors? He said Calder Rourke had been trying to destroy his family. He didn't elaborate. Harrison made notes in a small leather book. When did you first make contact with Mr. Thorne? 4 months ago, through a marriage broker in Boston. Which broker? A man named Sullivan. He had an office near the harbor. What exactly did Sullivan tell you about Mr. Thorne? Cordelia recited it from memory. Successful rancher, widowed, looking for an educated woman to help manage his household and eventually raise a family. He offered passage, security, and a modest allowance. Did that seem suspicious to you? A wealthy man using a marriage broker instead of finding a wife locally? I assumed he wanted someone without ties to local politics. She met Harrison's gaze. I was desperate enough not to question my good fortune too closely. And when you arrived, what were your impressions? That nothing was as I'd been told. The house is too large, the operation too sophisticated, my husband too young and too educated to need a frontier bride. She paused. I think I was hired for a role, Agent Harrison. I just don't know what role yet. Harrison studied her for a long moment. You're smarter than you look. I look smart enough. That earned her a thin smile. Fair point. Let me be direct, Mrs. Thorne. Your husband is going to hang for this murder unless someone can provide evidence to the contrary. Right now, everything points to him. The body was found on his property. The victim was his fiancée. The timeline matches. And we have an eyewitness. An eyewitness who's remained silent for 18 months, Cordelia pointed out. That doesn't strike you as convenient? It strikes me as scared. People don't inform on powerful men unless they absolutely have to. Or unless they're being paid to lie. Cole shifted uncomfortably by the door. Harrison's expression didn't change. Are you accusing Calder Rourke of fabricating evidence? I'm saying I've been in Red Hollow for less than 6 hours, and even I can see this town runs on old grudges and violence. Everyone here has a reason to lie. Including you? Including me, she admitted. I'm a woman with no money, no family, and no options who just married a man accused of murder. My motivations should be obvious. And what are those motivations, Mrs. Thorne? Survival. She said it without shame. Same as everyone else. Harrison closed his notebook. You can see your husband tomorrow at 10. Don't leave town. We'll have more questions. They left her sitting in a room full of wedding food that no one would eat. She could hear voices in other parts of the house. Staff cleaning up, agents conducting searches, the low murmur of people processing disaster. Through the window, she watched torches bobbing in the darkness as Rourke's men combed the property for additional evidence. The door opened. She tensed, expecting Harrison or Marcus or Mrs. Hale. Instead, Calder Rourke himself walked in. He moved with the confidence of someone who owned the space around him. Up close, he was more imposing than she'd realized. Tall, broad across the shoulders, with scars on his hands that spoke of work and violence in equal measure. Mrs. Thorne, he pulled out a chair and sat without asking permission. Hell of a wedding night. Get out of this house. Can't do that. Federal agents asked me to stick around in case they need local expertise. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Besides, I wanted to meet you. See what kind of woman agrees to marry Elias Thorne. A desperate one. We've established that. Desperate and smart. Dangerous combination. He leaned back, studying her. You really didn't know about Sarah? No. But you believe he didn't kill her? It wasn't a question, but Cordelia answered anyway. I don't know what I believe yet. Honest answer. I appreciate that. Rourke pulled something from his jacket. A photograph, creased and faded. He slid it across the table. That's Sarah Whitmore. Took it myself about 2 weeks before she vanished. Cordelia looked at the image. A woman in her early 30s, dark hair, strong features, standing in front of the general store with a half-smile that suggested she was uncomfortable being photographed. She wore a simple dress and carried herself with a stiffness that Cordelia recognized, someone trying to look like they belonged while feeling completely out of place. She looks like me, Cordelia said quietly. Same type, yeah. Educated, Eastern, refined enough to play the part of a rancher's wife, but hard enough to survive out here. Rourke took the photo back. Elias has a pattern. He looks for women who need rescue, makes them grateful, makes them dependent, makes them easy to control. Is that what happened to her? He tried to control her? Tried and failed. Sarah didn't control well. Rourke's voice carried grudging respect. She started asking questions about land deeds, about families that had been driven off their property, about disappearances and fires and cattle poisonings. She was building a case. Against Elias? Against the whole Thorne operation. Old man Thorne built this empire by stealing land and killing anyone who protested. Elias inherited that legacy. He leaned forward. I tried to warn Sarah, told her she was in over her head. She didn't listen, and 3 weeks later she was gone. If you knew she was in danger, why didn't you help her? I tried. She didn't trust me either. Bitterness crept into his voice. My family and the Thornes have been killing each other for 2 generations. Nobody in Red Hollow trusts a Rourke any more than they trust a Thorne. Cordelia pushed the photograph back across the table. Why are you telling me this? Because you're next. He said it flatly, without drama. Whatever role Elias hired you to play, it ends the same way Sarah's did. You get too curious, you learn too much, and you become a liability. I'm his wife. That gives me legal protection. Sarah was his fiancée. Didn't help her much. Rourke stood. I'm offering you a way out. Testify against him. Tell the court everything you've seen and heard tonight. Help us put together a case that sticks. In exchange, I'll make sure you're protected. Give you money to get back east. Set you up somewhere safe. You want me to betray a man I married 6 hours ago. I want you to survive longer than 6 weeks. He moved toward the door, then paused. Sarah tried to do this alone. Tried to be the hero who brought down the corrupt empire. Now she's in a grave and nothing's changed. Don't make the same mistake. He left before she could respond. Cordelia sat alone, surrounded by the debris of a wedding that felt like it happened in another lifetime. Her hands were shaking again. She clasped them together in her lap, trying to steady herself through breath and will. The door opened for the third time. Annie slipped in, carrying a tray with tea and something that looked like bread. "Mrs. Hale said you should eat," the girl said quietly, setting the tray down. "It's been a long day." "That's an understatement." Annie hovered uncertainly. "Is there anything else you need, ma'am?" "The truth." Cordelia looked up at her. "Did you know Sarah Whitmore?" The girl's face went carefully blank. "I should get back to—" "Please." Cordelia softened her voice. "I'm not trying to trap you. I just need to understand what I'm dealing with." Annie glanced at the door, weighing risks. Then she sat down across from Cordelia with the resigned air of someone tired of keeping secrets. "I knew her," she said finally. "Not well. She kept to herself mostly, but she was kind. Always said thank you. Never treated us like we were invisible." Her voice dropped. "Not like the Thorns. What happened to her? I don't know. One day she was here, the next she wasn't. Mr. Thorn, Elias, he said she'd changed her mind about the marriage and gone back east. But her things were still in her room, all her clothes, her books, even her traveling papers." Annie twisted her hands together. "People don't leave without their traveling papers." "Did she seem frightened before she disappeared?" "She seemed determined, like she was figuring something out." Annie's eyes went distant with memory. "I saw her in the study once, looking through old family documents. Mr. Marcus caught her, and there was an argument. I couldn't hear what they said, but she looked angry, told him he was just as guilty as the rest of them." "Marcus knew she was investigating?" "Everyone knew. We're not stupid." Bitterness crept into Annie's voice. "We see things, hear things, but we keep our mouths shut because that's how you stay employed. That's how you stay alive." "But someone talked to the federal agents, someone from inside the house." Annie went very still. "I don't know anything about that." "Annie, I don't." The girl stood abruptly. "And neither do you. That's the smartest thing you can do right now, Mrs. Thorne. Know nothing. See nothing. Be the confused bride who just wanted a fresh start." She headed for the door, then stopped. "Sarah tried to save people, tried to expose the truth and fix what was broken, and it got her killed. Don't make the same mistake." It was the second time someone had told her that tonight. The advice was starting to feel like a threat. Cordelia forced herself to eat the bread, though it tasted like sawdust in her mouth. She drank the tea, grateful for the warmth, if nothing else. Through the window, she watched the lights finally start to dim across the property. Rourke's men leaving, the federal agents packing up their initial sweep, the house settling into an exhausted silence. She should go to her room, should try to sleep, though she doubted sleep would come, should prepare herself for tomorrow's visit to the marshal's office and the interrogation that would follow. Instead, she climbed the stairs to Elias's study. The door was unlocked. Harrison's people had already been through it. She could tell from the way things had been moved and replaced, the slight disorder in spaces that had probably been meticulously organized. They'd taken some documents, but not all of them. Either they'd found what they needed, or they planned to come back. She lit the oil lamp on the desk and went through the remaining papers more carefully this time. Land deeds going back 40 years, most of them transfers from names she didn't recognize to Thorne ownership. Survey maps with sections marked in red. Correspondence between Elias's father and various territorial officials, discussing settlement opportunities in language that sounded official but felt predatory. Then she found the letters. They were bundled together with string, hidden in the back of a drawer beneath a false bottom she discovered by accident when the drawer stuck. 23 letters, all from Sarah Whitmore, all addressed to someone named Catherine Whitmore in Chicago. Cordelia untied the string with trembling fingers and began to read. The first letters were mundane, Sarah describing her journey west, her first impressions of Red Hollow, the awkwardness of meeting Elias for the first time. They could have been Cordelia's own letters if she'd had anyone to write to. But then the tone shifted. "Catherine, something isn't right here. The land records don't match the official surveys. Families that supposedly sold their property willingly have death certificates dated before the sales went through. I found a file in Thorne Sr.'s office. He kept meticulous records of what he called acquisitions. These weren't purchases, they were thefts. Murder documented like business transactions." 3 letters later. Elias knows I've been looking into his family history. He confronted me tonight, told me to stop asking questions. But here's the thing. I don't think he's the monster his father was. I think he's trapped by what he inherited. He actually seemed relieved when I pushed back, like he wanted someone to finally call him on all of this. Another letter, dated 2 days before Sarah disappeared. I've made contact with federal investigators. They're building a case, but they need proof. I'm going to get it. The evidence is here somewhere. I just need to find where Thorne Sr. hid it. Marcus is getting suspicious. Mrs. Hale watches me constantly. But I'm close, Catherine. So close to exposing the whole rotten foundation this empire is built on. The final letter was never sent. It sat unsealed, dated the day Sarah vanished. Catherine, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong. The documents I need are in the vault behind the portrait in the main hall. I've seen Thorne Sr.'s ghost walk into that wall a dozen times in the past week. Only it's not a ghost. It's Marcus using a concealed passage. Tonight I'm going to follow him. I'm going to get proof of everything. And if I don't make it back, tell the authorities to look in the... The letter ended mid-sentence. Cordelia sat back, her mind racing. A concealed passage, a vault, documents that proved the full extent of Thorne crimes. And Sarah Whitmore had died trying to reach them. She looked at the clock. Nearly midnight. The house was silent except for the usual settling sounds of old timber and stone. Everyone would be asleep, or at least in their rooms, exhausted from the chaos of the evening. This was probably the stupidest thing she could do. She took the lamp and went downstairs anyway. The main hall was empty, lit only by a few candles that Mrs. Hale's staff had left burning. The portrait Sarah mentioned dominated the far wall. Thorne Sr., rendered in oils with a rifle across his lap, and his land stretched out behind him like a conquered kingdom. Up close, the painting was even more unsettling. The artist had captured something predatory in the old man's eyes, a hunger that wealth hadn't satisfied. Cordelia examined this frame, looking for hinges or releases. Nothing obvious. She ran her hands along the edges, feeling for catches or buttons. The wall seemed solid. Then she remembered. Marcus using the passage, walking into it like he belonged there. She stepped back and looked at the floor. There, barely visible in the lamplight, were scuff marks. Repeated foot traffic in front of one specific section of the portrait. She pressed against the wall at that point. Nothing. Pressed harder, still nothing. Then she pushed upward, and something clicked. The portrait swung inward on silent hinges, revealing a narrow passage that led into darkness. Cordelia hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to close the door, go to her room, pretend she'd never seen this. Sarah Whitmore had gone into a passage like this and never come back out. But Sarah had been alone, and she'd been trying to be a hero. Cordelia wasn't interested in heroism. She was interested in survival, and survival meant understanding exactly what she'd walked into. She stepped through the opening. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. The walls were rough stone, the floor packed earth. It sloped downward, leading beneath the house into what must have been a cellar or foundation space. 20 feet in, the passage opened into a small room. It wasn't a vault. It was an office. A secret workspace where someone had conducted business they didn't want observed. A desk, filing cabinets, ledgers stacked on shelves, and on the walls maps marked with notations in a handwriting she didn't recognize. Cordelia set the lamp on the desk and opened the nearest ledger. What she found made her stomach turn. They were kill records, documented executions disguised as accidents or natural deaths, names, dates, methods. James Hendricks, trampled by horse, August 1851. Maria Gonzalez, accidental drowning, March 1853. The Kowalski family, house fire, December 1855. Dozens of them. Hundreds, going back decades. The Thorne Empire hadn't been built on hard work and shrewd business. It had been built on systematic murder. She heard the footsteps too late. Marcus Webb stood in the passage entrance, blocking her escape. He held a pistol, but he didn't look angry. He looked sad. "I really hoped you'd be smarter than this," he said quietly. Cordelia's hand went to the desk drawer, searching for a weapon. Marcus didn't move to stop her. There was nothing inside anyway. "How long have you known?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. "About the passage?" "Always. I grew up in this house." He stepped into the room. and she saw how exhausted he looked. About you sneaking down here? Since you left your room, Mrs. Hale and I take shifts. Someone's always watching. Are you going to kill me? That depends. He lowered the gun slightly, but didn't put it away. What are you planning to do with what you found? I don't know yet. Honest answer, that's good. He moved to the filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, and tossed it onto the desk. This is what Sarah was looking for when she died. Proof that could bring down not just the Thorns, but half the territorial government, judges, marshals, politicians, everyone who benefited from looking the other way while Old Man Thorn built his kingdom. Cordelia opened the folder. Inside were documents that would indeed shatter Red Hollow's entire power structure. Bribery records, forged deeds, witness statements that had been suppressed, and photographs of bodies that official reports claimed had died from natural causes. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because you have a choice to make. Same choice Sarah faced. Marcus sat on the edge of the desk, the gun now resting in his lap but still accessible. You can try to be the hero, take these documents to Harrison and his people, watch as everyone involved gets arrested and tried and probably hanged, including Elias. He said he didn't kill her. He didn't. I did. The words hung in the air like gun smoke. Cordelia's hands tightened on the folder. You murdered Sarah Whitmore. I executed a Pinkerton agent who was going to destroy everything my family spent 3 generations building. Marcus's voice was flat, emotionless. She wouldn't stop, wouldn't listen to reason, wouldn't take money to go away quietly. So I did what had to be done. And Elias knows? Elias suspects. He's not stupid, but he doesn't have proof, and I've never confirmed it. Marcus finally met her eyes. He's a good man trapped in a bad legacy. He didn't ask for any of this, didn't want the violence or the blood money, but it's what he inherited, and he's trying to manage it as best he can. By marrying women who can give him legitimacy while you murder anyone who gets too close to the truth, by trying to transition this operation into something legal before everything collapses. Anger crept into Marcus's voice for the first time. You think Elias wanted you here? He fought it. But the debts are crushing us. Rourke's been systematically destroying our business. We needed investment, and investors don't back unmarried men running frontier operations built on their father's reputation. We needed stability, respectability, a wife who could play the part while we tried to dig ourselves out. And when I got too curious, what then? Then I'd have done what I'm doing right now, given you a choice. He gestured at the documents. Take these to the authorities and watch everyone burn, including yourself. You're married to Elias. His crimes become your crimes in the eyes of the law. At best, you're left destitute. At worst, you're tried as an accessory. Or you help us survive this. The federal case against Elias is built on circumstantial evidence and Rourke's testimony. Without a body in good condition, without clear proof of Elias's direct involvement, it falls apart. Harrison knows that. That's why he's pressuring you to testify. You want me to lie for you? I want you to stick to your original role. Be the confused bride who knows nothing. Let Elias's lawyers do their job. And when this all blows over, if it blows over, help us turn this operation legitimate. Use that education you're so proud of, those accounting skills, that sharp mind. Help us build something that doesn't require killing to maintain. Cordelia looked at the documents in her hands. Evidence of decades of crimes. Proof that could bring justice for Sarah Whitmore and dozens of others whose deaths had been covered up, and it would destroy her in the process. What happened to her body? She asked quietly. Sarah, what did you do with her? Marcus's jaw tightened. Buried her in the eastern bunkhouse under the floorboards. It was supposed to be temporary until I could move her somewhere more permanent, but Rourke had spies watching everything. I couldn't risk it. And the informant who led Harrison to her? One of Rourke's men planted in our outfit 6 months ago. We didn't know until tonight. Marcus stood, the gun returning to his hand but still not pointed at her. He's already gone. Disappeared right after the arrest. Probably halfway to California by now with Rourke's money in his pocket. So this whole thing is a setup. Rourke orchestrated it. Rourke created the opportunity. I handed him the ammunition when I killed Sarah. For the first time, something that might have been regret flickered across Marcus's face. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm offering you survival. Take these documents, burn them, and play your part. Or take them to Harrison and watch everyone fall, yourself included. He left the gun on the desk, a deliberate gesture, and walked toward the passage. One more thing, he said from the entrance. Whatever you decide, do it fast. Harrison's coming back tomorrow with a full team. They're going to tear this house apart. If they find this room, if they find those ledgers, it's over for all of us. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading up the passage. Cordelia stood alone in a room full of ghosts. She looked at the documents, looked at the ledgers, looked at the evidence of systematic evil that could bring down an empire. Sarah Whitmore had died trying to expose this, died believing that truth and justice mattered more than survival. And where had it gotten her? Buried under floorboards for 18 months, her investigation incomplete, her sacrifice meaningless. Cordelia gathered up the most damning documents, the ones that directly implicated current officials, the ones with clear evidence of murder and fraud. She left the older ledgers, the historical records that documented crimes beyond prosecution. Then she climbed back up the passage, sealed the portrait behind her, and went to her room. She didn't sleep. She sat at the window watching the sunrise over Red Hollow, holding documents that could destroy her husband and everyone associated with him, including herself. At 9:30, Mrs. Hale knocked on her door. "The carriage is ready to take you to town. Agent Harrison is expecting you." Cordelia looked at the woman who'd been nothing but hostile since her arrival. "Did you know about Sarah?" Mrs. Hale's expression didn't flicker. "I knew she was going to get herself killed. Tried to warn her, same as I'm trying to warn you." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I've worked for the Thorns for 30 years. Watched them build this empire on blood and lies, but I've also watched them employ half this county, feed families, keep this town alive when everywhere else around here died off. It's not simple. It's never simple. Marcus killed her. I know, and you've said nothing. I've said plenty, just not to the people you think I should." Mrs. Hale moved to the window, looking out at the same sunrise. "There's a difference between justice and revenge, Mrs. Thorne. Harrison and his people, they're not here for justice. They're here because someone in Washington wants territorial land opened up for railroad development, and the Thorns are in the way. Sarah Whitmore was a tool. You're a tool. We're all tools in someone else's game. That's a convenient philosophy for someone covering up murder. It's a realistic philosophy for someone trying to survive in a place where the law is whatever the powerful say it is." Mrs. Hale turned to face her. "You can hand over whatever you found last night. Watch this house burn. Then watch as Rourke and his people take over everything, and nothing actually changes except the name on the deed. Or you can be smart. Everyone keeps telling me to be smart. No one's telling me what that means. It means understanding that you can't save everyone, can't fix everything, can't make the past better." Mrs. Hale's voice softened slightly. "But maybe you can make the future less terrible, if you survive long enough to see it." The carriage ride into town was silent. Cordelia rode alone except for the driver, a man who'd apparently been paid to have neither opinions nor conversation. She used the time to rehearse what she'd say, what she'd reveal, what she'd hide. The marshal's office was a low stone building that looked more like a fortress than a place of law. Inside, it smelled of old sweat and desperation. Agent Harrison waited in what passed for an interrogation room, a windowless space with a table, 3 chairs, and walls that had probably witnessed more confessions than trials. "Mrs. Thorne?" He gestured to a seat. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice? Not really." He sat across from her, that same leather notebook open in front of him. "I'll be direct. We need your testimony to make this case stick. Physical evidence is good. Eyewitness testimony is better. But a wife's statement carries weight that other testimony doesn't. Because wives don't lie about their husbands? Because juries believe wives are too afraid to lie." He leaned back. "You spent time in that house last night. You've had access to Elias's private spaces, his papers, his secrets. What did you find?" This was the moment, the choice Marcus had described, the decision Sarah Whitmore had made that led to her death. Cordelia pulled the documents from her bag and placed them on the table. Harrison's eyes widened, then narrowed. He picked them up carefully, scanning the pages with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what they were looking at. "Where did you get these?" he asked quietly. From my husband's study. They were in his desk. These implicate federal judges, U.S. marshals, the territorial governor himself. Harrison looked up at her. Do you understand what this means? It means the corruption goes deeper than one family. It means you've made yourself extremely valuable and extremely vulnerable. He gathered the documents carefully. These change everything, but they also make you a target. Rourke will want you silent. The officials named here will want you dead, and your husband's people will see you as a traitor. I'm already all of those things. True. Harrison stood, moving to the door and calling for Agent Cole. We need to move you to protective custody. Immediately. You can't go back to that house. I need to see my husband first. Mrs. Thorne, you want my continued cooperation? I need to see Elias, alone. 10 minutes. Harrison considered this, then nodded. 10 minutes. But Cole stays outside the door. They took her down a narrow hallway to the cells. There were 3 of them, all empty except the one at the end. Elias sat on a cot that looked barely capable of supporting his weight, his wedding suit rumpled and stained. He looked up when the door opened, and something flickered in his expression when he saw her. Not hope, something closer to resignation. Leave us, Cordelia said to Cole. The agent looked at Harrison, who nodded. The door closed, leaving them alone with iron bars between them. You shouldn't be here, Elias said quietly. I'm your wife. This is exactly where I should be. That piece of paper doesn't mean anything. Not anymore. He stood, moving closer to the bars, but not touching them. Harrison already told me you found documents, that you're cooperating with their investigation. Did he tell you which documents? Does it matter? You did what you had to do to survive. I don't blame you for that. Cordelia moved closer, lowering her voice. I gave them the documents that implicate federal officials, the ones that prove the corruption extends beyond your family. Do you understand what that means? His eyes sharpened. It means you just made their case more complicated. It means they can't use you as a scapegoat anymore. They can't claim this was all the Thorns while ignoring everyone who helped you. She pressed against the bars. Marcus told me he killed Sarah. Is that true? Elias closed his eyes briefly. I don't know. I've suspected it, but I've never had proof. Did you love her, Sarah? I barely knew her. He opened his eyes again. Same as I barely know you. These weren't real marriages, they were transactions. Then why do you look like someone who lost something that mattered? He smiled without humor. Because I'm tired of being my father's son. Tired of managing an empire built on corpses. Sarah represented a way out, a chance to expose everything, face consequences, and maybe start over with a clean slate. When she disappeared, that chance died with her. It's not dead. Cordelia glanced at the door, making sure they were still alone. I didn't give Harrison everything, the historical ledgers, the full scope of your father's crimes, the evidence that would destroy you completely. I held those back. What I gave them is enough to force a broader investigation that takes pressure off you specifically. Why would you do that? Because I'm not interested in justice. I'm interested in surviving this with enough left over to build something better. She met his gaze. Marcus offered me a choice. Destroy everything or help salvage what can be salvaged. I chose option 3. Which is, destroy the people who deserve it while protecting the people who might actually change. She stepped back from the bars. But I need you to be honest with me. Did you know Marcus killed Sarah when it happened, or did you find out later? I found her room empty, her things still there. Marcus told me she'd run off, but I knew he was lying. Elias's voice dropped. I didn't push. I told myself I couldn't be sure, that maybe she really had left, that it was better not to know. That's cowardice. I know. But it's honest cowardice. I can work with that. Cordelia moved back to the door, then paused. The informant who led Harrison to Sarah's body. Do you know who it was? One of Rourke's plants, man named Stevens. He's already gone. Marcus said the same thing. Do you believe it? Elias was quiet for a long moment. No. I think the informant is still in that house, still watching, still reporting, and I think when you go back there tonight, you'll be walking into a trap. The door opened. Cole stood there, looking impatient. Time's up. Cordelia held Elias's gaze for another moment. Then she turned and walked out, leaving her husband in his cell with secrets neither of them fully trusted. Harrison was waiting outside. Well, he's hiding something, but I don't think it's murder. She kept her voice level. I'll testify about what I found in his study, but I need protection, and I need it now. We'll set you up in a safe house, get you out of Red Hollow until the trial. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. If I disappear, whoever killed Sarah will know I'm cooperating. They'll run or destroy evidence, or both. I need to go back to the house, act normal, make them think I'm just the confused bride waiting for her husband. That's extremely dangerous. Everything about this situation is dangerous. At least this way I might learn something useful. Harrison didn't like it. She could see that in the way his jaw tightened, but he also recognized the value of an inside source. 24 hours. That's all I'm giving you. Tomorrow night, we pull you out, whether you're ready or not. She agreed because she had no choice, because survival meant staying valuable to everyone while trusting no one. The carriage took her back to the Thorne estate as afternoon shadows stretched across the valley. The house looked different in daylight, less ominous, more sad, like something that had outlived its purpose. Mrs. Hale met her at the door. How was your visit? Illuminating. Cordelia handed her traveling cloak to Annie, who appeared from nowhere to take it. I need to speak with Marcus. Mr. Webb is in the north pasture. Won't be back until evening. Then I'll wait. She spent the afternoon in the study, ostensibly going through household accounts that Mrs. Hale provided. In reality, she was searching for anything she'd missed the night before. Any clue about who might have informed on Elias, any hint of additional secrets waiting to surface. She found nothing. Whoever had betrayed the family had been careful not to leave evidence. Marcus returned at sunset, covered in trail dust and looking exhausted. He found her in the dining room, where Mrs. Hale had insisted she eat despite having no appetite. We need to talk, she said. We really don't. Someone in this house is still informing for Harrison or Rourke or both. That puts all of us at risk. That got his attention. He sat down across from her, waving away the food Annie tried to serve. What makes you think the informant is still here? Because Elias doesn't think Stevens was working alone. And because Harrison's people know too much about the internal layout of this house. Someone's been giving them detailed information. Marcus's expression went carefully neutral. Could be Stevens before he left. Could be. Or it could be someone else who's still here, still watching, still waiting for the next opportunity to sell information. She leaned forward. I gave Harrison documents that implicate federal officials. That makes all of us valuable to multiple sides now. If there's an informant, they're going to report that. And whoever they're reporting to is going to make a move. What kind of move? I don't know. That's why I'm telling you, so we can be ready when it happens. They sat in silence for a moment, the house creaking around them with sounds that could have been wind or footsteps or something worse. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, Marcus said finally. Everyone keeps underestimating me. It's becoming insulting. Good. Let them keep underestimating you. It's kept you alive this long. He left her alone with her barely touched meal and too many thoughts. Night fell hard and fast, the way it did in the mountains. Cordelia retreated to her room, locked the door, and positioned a chair against it for good measure. Through the window, she could see lights moving across the property, ranch hands finishing evening work, or maybe Rourke's spies watching for weakness. She fell asleep in the chair, fully dressed, with one of Elias's guns from the study hidden under her pillow. She woke to the sound of breaking glass and the smell of smoke. The house was on fire. Cordelia grabbed the gun and hit the floor as another window exploded inward, spraying glass across the room. Smoke was already thick in the hallway outside, seeping under the door in gray tendrils that reached for her like fingers. She crawled to the door, touched the handle. Hot, but not scalding. She wrapped her hand in her skirt and turned it slowly. The hallway was a wall of smoke, lit orange from below. Flames were climbing the main staircase, feeding on decades of dry timber and expensive furnishings that had been chosen for beauty, not practicality. Someone was screaming downstairs. A woman's voice, high and panicked. Cordelia dropped low where the air was clearer and moved toward the sound. The smoke burned her lungs with each breath. Her eyes watered so badly she could barely see. She felt her way along the wall, counting doors until she reached the servants' stairs at the back of the house. The narrow stairwell was still relatively clear. She took the steps two at a time, the gun heavy in her hand, useless against fire but necessary for whatever came after. The kitchen was chaos. Annie stood frozen near the stove, her face streaked with soot and tears. Mrs. Hale was trying to organize a bucket line, but there were only 3 other people, ranch hands who'd run in from the bunkhouses, and nowhere near enough water. "Where did it start?" Cordelia shouted over the roar of flames. Mrs. Hale pointed toward the front of the house. "Main hall. Multiple points simultaneously. This wasn't an accident." Of course it wasn't. Someone had decided that if they couldn't control the Thorn Empire, they'd burn it to the ground. "We need to evacuate," Cordelia said. "The whole structure's going to collapse." "There are people upstairs," Annie said, her voice breaking. "Mr. Webb's room is in the east wing. He might not know." "I'll get him." Cordelia turned to Mrs. Hale. "Get everyone out. Don't try to save anything. Just get out." She didn't wait for acknowledgement. She ran back toward the servants' stairs, but the smoke had gotten worse. The stairwell was no longer passable. She'd have to go through the main part of the house. The dining room was untouched so far, but the heat was intense. She could hear timber groaning, walls beginning to buckle under stress they were never designed to handle. The portrait of Thorne Sr. had already caught fire, the old man's face melting into abstract horror. She thought about the secret room behind it, all those ledgers, all that evidence, going up in smoke. Maybe that was the point. The east wing hallway was clear, but not by much. She pounded on Marcus's door. "Marcus, the house is on fire!" No answer. She tried the handle. Locked. She stepped back and kicked it hard just below the lock. Pain shot up her leg, but the door held. She kicked again, throwing all her weight behind it. The frame splintered and the door swung open. Marcus's room was empty. The bed hadn't been slept in. His clothes were still laid out for mourning. He'd never come upstairs. Where the hell was he? A crash from below shook the entire house. Part of the main staircase had collapsed, sending up a fresh gout of flames and sparks. The fire had found something particularly flammable, probably the alcohol in Elias's study. Cordelia ran back toward the servants' stairs, hoping the route had cleared. It hadn't. If anything, it was worse. She was trapped on the second floor with fire on all sides and no obvious way down. Then she remembered the passage. She sprinted back to the main hall, dodging burning debris that fell from the ceiling. The portrait was mostly destroyed, but the mechanism should still work. She found the spot where she'd pressed before, now hot enough to blister her palm through her skirt. She pushed upward. Nothing happened. She pushed harder, feeling skin tear. The mechanism clicked. The door swung open. The passage was full of smoke, but it led down, and down meant out. She plunged into the darkness, one hand on the wall to guide her, the other still gripping the gun she'd probably never use. Her foot caught on something soft. She stumbled, went down hard on her knees, reached back to feel what had tripped her. A body. She recoiled, scrambling backward, then forced herself to move forward again, to check. The passage was too dark to see, but her hands found fabric, a jacket, shoulders, a face that was still warm. Marcus Webb. Unconscious or dead, she couldn't tell which. There was a wound on the back of his head, sticky with blood. Someone had hit him, left him here to die in the smoke and fire. Cordelia hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled. He was heavy, dead weight that didn't help her at all. She got him maybe 5 feet before her arms gave out. She tried again, made it another few feet. The smoke was getting thicker. Her lungs were screaming. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She wasn't going to make it, wasn't strong enough to drag him all the way to the bottom. Then hands grabbed her from behind. She nearly screamed before recognizing Mrs. Hale's voice. "I've got his legs! Move!" Between them, they hauled Marcus down the passage. Cordelia had no idea how the older woman had found them, but she wasn't questioning miracles right now. They emerged into the secret office, which was already starting to fill with smoke from above. "There's another exit," Mrs. Hale gasped. "Through the back, old root cellar that opens to the pasture." They dragged Marcus through a door Cordelia hadn't noticed before, down another passage that was even narrower. Her shoulders scraped against stone walls. The air got cooler, damper. And then suddenly they were outside, sprawling onto grass still wet with evening dew. Cordelia gulped clean air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. Behind them, the Thorne mansion burned like a funeral pyre, lighting up the night sky for miles. People had gathered at a safe distance, ranch hands, household staff, a few curious townspeople drawn by the spectacle. No one was trying to fight it anymore. The house was already lost. Annie appeared with blankets. Someone else brought water. Mrs. Hale checked Marcus's pulse and nodded grimly. "He's alive. Barely." "Who hit him?" Cordelia asked, though she already knew the answer didn't matter as much as the question it raised. Who knew he'd be in that passage? Someone who's been watching this house very carefully. Mrs. Hale's face was hard in the firelight. Someone who knew the layout well enough to plan this. Cordelia turned to scan the crowd, looking for faces that showed too much satisfaction, too much calculation. Anyone who looked like they'd just accomplished something instead of lost everything. Her eyes caught on a figure standing apart from the others. Calder Rourke, watching the fire with an expression that wasn't quite triumph, more like grim satisfaction at a job completed. She started walking toward him before she fully decided to. Mrs. Hale caught her arm. Don't. He did this? Probably, but you can't prove it, and confronting him now just makes you a target. I'm already a target. Cordelia pulled free. Everyone keeps telling me to be smart and stay quiet and survive. But Sarah tried that. Marcus tried that. Look where it got them. She crossed the distance to Rourke. Up close, she could smell smoke on him, too. Not the fresh smoke of someone who'd just arrived to watch. The older smoke of someone who'd been near the fire when it started. You did this, she said. Not a question. Rourke didn't deny it. That house was built on stolen land with blood money. It deserved to burn. There were people inside. I made sure everyone got out first. I'm not a murderer, Mrs. Thorne. No, you just destroy people's lives and call it justice. I call it balance. He gestured at the burning mansion. Your husband's grandfather drove my family off our land, killed my uncle when he tried to resist, built that monument to his own greed on property that wasn't his. Tonight, I took back what's mine. By destroying evidence that could have freed Elias? That made him pause. What evidence? Documents in the house proving federal complicity in land fraud, proof that the corruption extends far beyond the Thornes. Cordelia watched his face carefully. But you knew that already, didn't you? That's why you burned it. Not for revenge, to protect your own interests. Rourke's expression went flat. You're making dangerous accusations. I'm making observations. You've been just as involved in the territorial corruption as the Thornes. Different side, same game. And when Sarah Whitmore started investigating, you couldn't risk her finding that out. Sarah's death was a tragedy. Sarah's death was convenient for a lot of people, including you. Cordelia stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You wanted the Thornes destroyed, but you wanted it done in a way that didn't expose your own crimes. So you pushed Harrison to investigate, planted evidence, arranged for that body to be found, all of it carefully orchestrated to bring down Elias while keeping yourself clean. You're a smart woman. Rourke's voice carried a warning now. Too smart for your own good. Be careful that doesn't become a problem. It's already a problem. The question is whose problem it becomes. A commotion behind them made them both turn. Marcus had regained consciousness and was trying to stand despite Mrs. Hale's protests. He saw Cordelia with Rourke, and his hand went to his belt, searching for a gun that wasn't there. Marcus, don't, Cordelia called. It's handled. Nothing's handled. Marcus's voice was rough with smoke damage. He tried to kill me, left me in that passage to burn. Rourke's expression didn't change. I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been in town all evening. Dozen witnesses can confirm it. Of course you have witnesses. You always have witnesses. Marcus took an unsteady step forward. But we both know you don't get your hands dirty anymore. You hire people to do it, like Stevens, like whoever planted the fire tonight. Stevens is gone, Rourke said. Long gone, from what I hear. But his replacement is still here. Marcus looked past Rourke, scanning the crowd. Still watching, still waiting for the next opportunity to finish what he started. Cordelia followed his gaze, trying to see what he saw. There were maybe 50 people gathered now, drawn by the spectacle. Ranch hands, townspeople. A few of Harrison's federal agents who'd arrived too late to do anything useful. Any of them could be working for Rourke. All of them had reasons to want the Thornes gone. Then she saw him. A man standing near the edge of the crowd, trying to look casual but failing. He was watching Marcus with too much intensity. And when Marcus's eyes landed on him, the man's hand moved toward his jacket. There, Marcus shouted. The man ran. 3 people gave chase, 2 ranch hands and one of Harrison's agents. They caught him 50 yards out, dragging him down into the mud. He fought like someone with nothing left to lose, landing a few good punches before weight and numbers overwhelmed him. They hauled him back toward the firelight, his face now visible. Cordelia recognized him vaguely. One of the kitchen workers, someone who'd been around the house but never particularly noticeable. The kind of person who could watch and listen without drawing attention. His name's Porter, Mrs. Hale said quietly, appearing at Cordelia's elbow. Been working here about 8 months. Came with good references from a ranch up north. Forged references, Marcus corrected, limping over. I'm guessing Rourke's been planning this for a while. Agent Harrison emerged from the crowd, his suit rumpled and his expression dangerous. He looked at the burning house, then at Porter struggling against the men holding him, then at Rourke standing calm and collected nearby. Someone want to tell me what the hell's going on? Harrison demanded. Mr. Porter started a fire, Mrs. Hale said. Multiple points of origin, accelerant used. He also assaulted Mr. Webb and left him for dead in a concealed passage. That true, Porter? Harrison asked. Porter said nothing, but the guilt was written all over his face. Who hired you? Harrison pressed. Who are you working for? Still nothing. Harrison nodded to his agent. Take him. Federal arson charge at minimum. Attempted murder if Webb wants to press charges. He turned to Rourke. You and I need to talk, privately. They walked away from the crowd, out toward the pasture where the firelight didn't reach. Cordelia couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read body language. Harrison was angry. Rourke was defensive. Whatever alliance they'd had, if they'd ever had one, was fracturing. We need to get Marcus to a doctor, Mrs. Hale said. That head wound needs proper treatment. I'm fine, Marcus protested, though he was swaying on his feet. You have a concussion at minimum, possibly a skull fracture. You're going to the doctor. Mrs. Hale's tone allowed no argument. She looked at Cordelia. You should come too. Get checked for smoke inhalation. I'm staying here. There's nothing left to stay for. The house is gone. The evidence is gone. Everything your husband built, everything his family built. It's all burning. Cordelia looked at the inferno that had been her home for exactly 2 days. Mrs. Hale was right. There was nothing left to save. The roof had already collapsed. The walls would follow soon. By morning, there'd be nothing but a blackened foundation and the ghosts of everyone who died to build this empire. Not everything burned, she said quietly. I got out with documents. The most important ones. Hidden them before the fire started. Mrs. Hale's eyes widened. Where? Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one will think to look. Cordelia had actually shoved them inside her corset before falling asleep, paranoid and uncomfortable but secure. If Harrison or Rourke want them, they'll have to negotiate. A slow smile crossed Mrs. Hale's face. You're learning. I've been learning since I arrived. Everyone here underestimated me, including you. Fair enough. Mrs. Hale gestured toward the crowd, which was starting to disperse now that the excitement was fading. Most of these people have nowhere to go. The bunkhouses are damaged. The main house is gone. We're going to have a refugee camp on our hands by morning. Then we deal with it. Find temporary shelter. Get people fed and warm. Figure out what comes next. Cordelia was making it up as she went, but that seemed to be her specialty now. What would Elias want us to do? Elias would want you safe, away from here, protected from whatever comes next. Elias doesn't get what he wants. None of us do. Cordelia watched Harrison and Rourke finish their conversation. Both men looked unhappy with whatever conclusion they'd reached. But maybe we can get something close. Harrison returned first, his expression carefully neutral. Mrs. Thorne, I need you to come with me. Federal protective custody, effective immediately. No. This isn't a request. You have documents that are evidence in a federal investigation. You're a material witness. And someone just tried to burn down a house with you in it. You're coming into custody for your own safety. My own safety, or so you can control what I do with those documents. Harrison's jaw tightened. Both, if we're being honest. You've become a valuable asset. Assets need protection. Assets also need leverage. Cordelia crossed her arms. I'll trade you information for answers. Who knew about the documents I found yesterday? Who did you tell? No one outside the investigation. Someone knew. Someone knew enough to burn the house down tonight, eliminating the evidence before you could secure it properly. She watched his face. Unless you're the one who ordered it burned. That's absurd. Is it? You said yourself this investigation extends beyond the Thorns. Maybe it extends to people you don't want exposed, people in Washington who benefit from keeping territorial corruption quiet. Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he gestured for Agent Cole. Take Mrs. Thorne to the safe house. No stops, no delays. And don't tell anyone where you're taking her. Agent Harrison, Cole began. Those are orders. Follow them. Cole looked unhappy but nodded. He moved toward Cordelia, hand outstretched to guide her away. She didn't move. I'm not going anywhere until I see my husband. Impossible. He's in federal custody. You want those documents? You want my testimony? Then arrange a meeting, tonight, right now. Cordelia's voice hardened. Otherwise, I'll walk away from here, and you'll never find me or the evidence. You wouldn't get far. I got from Boston to Red Hollow on my own, with $50 and determination. I'd manage. She met his eyes. I'm done being moved around like a chess piece. If you want my cooperation, I want something in return. And what I want is to see Elias. Harrison stared at her, clearly recalculating. Then he pulled out his pocket watch, checked the time, and cursed under his breath. You get 5 minutes. That's all. Cole will take you to the marshal's office. You see your husband, then you go to the safe house. Non-negotiable. Fine. They rode into town in silence, Cordelia and Cole in a wagon borrowed from one of the ranch hands. The streets were empty at this hour. Everyone who cared about the fire was already out at the Thorne property. The marshal's office looked dark except for a single lamp burning in the back. Cole unlocked the door and led her inside. The night deputy was asleep at the front desk, snoring loud enough to shake the windows. Cole didn't wake him, just led Cordelia straight to the cells. Elias was awake, sitting on his cot with his head in his hands. He looked up when the door opened, and whatever he'd been expecting, it wasn't Cordelia covered in soot with her hair falling out of its pins. What happened? He asked immediately. Someone burned down your house, nearly killed Marcus in the process. Probably would have killed me too if I hadn't found the passage. She moved closer to the bars. Cole, give us privacy. The agent hesitated, then stepped back into the hallway. Close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to create the illusion of privacy. Are you hurt? Elias asked. Smoke inhalation, some burns, nothing serious. She pulled the documents from inside her corset, unfolding pages that were wrinkled and damp with sweat. I saved these. The evidence that implicates federal officials, but everything else burned. The ledgers, the full historical records, all of it gone. Elias looked at the papers without reaching for them. Convenient timing. That's what I thought. Someone wanted that evidence destroyed before it could be properly cataloged and secured. She kept her voice low. Question is whether that someone was Rourke or Harrison or someone else entirely. Could be all of them. Could be none of them. Elias finally stood, moving to the bars. This whole thing is bigger than we understood. Bigger than my family's crimes or Rourke's vendetta. There's a railroad company trying to buy territorial land for development. Politicians in Washington who need the current power structure dismantled so they can install their own people. Banks that hold mortgages on half the county and would love an excuse to foreclose. How do you know all this? Because my father played the same game, used the same tactics. He was just smaller scale. Elias's expression was bleak. I thought I could manage the transition. Take what he built and make it legitimate. But you can't make blood money clean. It just spreads the stain further. You could have told me this before we got married. Would you have come if I had? Probably not. Then why are we having this conversation? You should be halfway to the safe house by now, protecting yourself and leaving me to face consequences I deserve. Cordelia folded the documents and tucked them back inside her corset. Because I'm tired of everyone treating me like I'm something fragile that needs protecting. Sarah Whitmore tried to be the hero, and it got her killed. But she made the mistake of working alone, trusting no one, thinking she could single-handedly bring down corruption. And you think you can do better? I think I can be smarter about who I trust and what I'm willing to sacrifice. She met his eyes through the bars. Harrison wants these documents to control his investigation. Rourke wants them destroyed to protect himself. You want them to prove your innocence or at least distribute guilt. Everyone wants something, and I'm the only one who has what they want. That makes you powerful. It also makes you a target. I've been a target since I stepped off that stagecoach. At least now I have leverage. She glanced back toward where Cole waited. I'm going to their safe house, going to play the frightened witness who needs protection. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to figure out who actually killed Sarah Whitmore and why everyone is so invested in blaming you. Marcus killed her. Maybe. Or maybe that's what someone wanted you to think. Cordelia pressed her hand against the bars, as close as she could get to touching him. Did you ever actually see proof? Or did Marcus just confess and you accepted it? Elias's expression shifted. He confessed. The night she disappeared. Told me she'd found the evidence room and he'd stopped her. Said it was necessary. And you believed him. I had no reason not to. Marcus has been covering for my family since we were children. He's done worse things than kill a Pinkerton agent. Or he wanted you to think he had. Create guilt, create leverage. Make sure you'd never question his loyalty because you thought you owed him silence. Cordelia stepped back. What if Marcus didn't kill Sarah? What if someone else did and let him take the blame? Why would he do that? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. Cole appeared in the doorway. Time's up, Mrs. Thorne. She looked at Elias one more time. Don't confess to anything, don't accept any deals, and don't trust anyone, including me. Everyone in this situation is lying about something. What are you lying about? He asked. She smiled without humor. I haven't decided yet. The safe house turned out to be a farmstead about 10 miles outside town, isolated enough to be defensible but close enough to reach if Harrison needed her. 2 federal agents were stationed there, one she didn't recognize and one who'd been at the house the night of the wedding. They gave her a small bedroom with a window that had bars on it. For her protection, they said. The door locked from the outside. Also for her protection. She was a prisoner pretending to be a witness, pretending to be a victim. The layers of deception were exhausting. She slept fitfully, waking at every sound. When dawn finally came, she was at the window, watching the sun rise over unfamiliar land. Somewhere out there, the Thorne estate was still smoldering. Marcus was recovering from a head wound. Elias was sitting in a cell waiting for a trial that would determine whether he hung for a murder he might not have committed. And Cordelia was sitting in a farmhouse, with documents hidden in her undergarments, trying to figure out which lie would keep her alive longest. Harrison arrived mid-morning with coffee and questions. He sat across from her at the small kitchen table and pulled out that ever-present notebook. Tell me about the documents, he said. Everything you found. Everything you held back. Why should I trust you? Because I'm the only thing standing between you and a dozen people who want you dead. He sipped his coffee. But if you need more motivation, I want justice for Sarah Whitmore. Real justice, not political theater, and I think you do too. I want to survive. Same thing, in this case. If we don't expose who actually killed her, this whole situation repeats. Another woman comes to Red Hollow. Another body ends up buried. The cycle continues. Cordelia studied him. He was good. She'd give him that. The right amount of sincerity mixed with pragmatism. But she'd learned not to trust sincerity. The documents I gave you yesterday implicate territorial judges and federal marshals in land fraud schemes dating back 15 years, she said. They show systematic corruption that allowed the Thornes and families like them to steal property with legal cover. And the documents you didn't give me show that Calder Rourke was involved in the same schemes. Different method, same result. While the Thornes were stealing from the south, Rourke was stealing from the north. They weren't enemies fighting over principles. They were competitors fighting over territory. Harrison's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. That's a serious accusation. It's also true. I saw the records. Survey maps showing overlapping claims. Documents where both Thorne Sr. and Rourke's father signed off on displacing families, then dividing the spoils. She leaned forward. Sarah found those records too. That's why she died. Not because she threatened the Thornes specifically, but because she threatened the entire system that both families benefited from. If that's true, why would Rourke push for this investigation? Why risk exposing himself? Because he thought he could control it. Thought he could aim it at the Thornes while keeping himself clean. But Sarah was thorough. She documented everything, and once that evidence became public, it would destroy both families. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, staring at his coffee like it held answers. Do you still have these records? The ones showing Rourke's involvement? Some of them. The ones I could grab before the fire. The rest burned. How convenient. For whom? Not for me. I'm the one sitting in a farmhouse prison hoping I don't get killed for knowing too much. Fair point. Harrison closed his notebook. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Thorne. This investigation is falling apart. My superiors in Washington are pressuring me to wrap it up quickly. Indict Elias Thorne, close the case, move on. They don't want a broader corruption investigation, don't want to embarrass federal officials who might have friends in Congress. So you're going to let them bury it. I didn't say that. He met her eyes. But I need ironclad evidence. I need testimony that will force the investigation to expand despite political pressure. And I need it fast before someone decides you're too dangerous to keep alive. Is that a threat? It's a warning. You've made yourself valuable, which means you've made yourself vulnerable. He stood. I'm giving you 24 hours. Decide whether you want to work with me to expose everyone involved, or whether you want to take your chances playing all sides against each other. But choose carefully, because the next person who comes through that door might not be here to protect you. He left her alone with that cheerful thought. Cordelia spent the day pacing the small farmhouse, trying to think through her options. She had evidence that could destroy both the Thornes and the Rourkes. She had a husband facing murder charges. She had federal agents who might or might not be trustworthy, and she had her own survival to consider. The smart play was to give Harrison everything and let him handle it. Testify at trial. Take whatever protection deal he offered. Start over somewhere far from Red Hollow. But the smart play had gotten Sarah Whitmore killed. Evening was falling when she heard horses approaching. She moved to the window, trying to see who it was. The agent stationed outside went to meet them, hand on his weapon. A brief conversation. Then the agent stepped aside, letting the visitor pass. Mrs. Hale walked into the farmhouse like she owned it, carrying a basket covered with a cloth. She nodded at the agent guarding Cordelia's door. I brought food for Mrs. Thorne. Agent Harrison said it was permitted. The agent looked uncertain but stepped aside. Mrs. Hale entered the small bedroom and closed the door behind her. How did you find me? Cordelia asked. I've lived in this county for 30 years. I know every farmhouse, every safe house, every place the Federals think is secret. She set the basket on the bed. We need to talk, and we don't have much time. About what? About who actually killed Sarah Whitmore. Mrs. Hale pulled back the cloth, revealing not food, but documents. Old documents, yellowed with age. Because it wasn't Marcus Webb, and it wasn't Elias Thorne. It was someone who's been using this whole situation to cover their tracks. Cordelia stared at the papers. Who? Someone who had access to both families. Someone who benefited from keeping them at war with each other. Someone who's been playing both sides for years. Mrs. Hale's expression was grim. Sarah figured it out 3 days before she died. She told me because she needed someone to know, in case something happened to her. And I've been carrying that knowledge for 18 months, waiting for the right moment to use it. Why now? Because Marcus almost died last night. Because you're in danger. Because this has gone on long enough. She spread the documents across the bed. Sarah found proof that someone was embezzling from both the Thornes and the Rourkes. Skimming money from land sales, forging documents, creating conflicts between the families to cover the theft. She confronted this person, told them she was going to expose everything, and they killed her for it. Who? Cordelia asked again. Mrs. Hale looked her in the eye. Agent Harrison. The words hung in the air like smoke. That's impossible, Cordelia said, even as her mind raced to fit the pieces together. He's a federal agent. He's investigating the crimes. He's investigating the crimes he didn't commit, the land fraud, the murders, the systematic corruption. All of that predates him. But the embezzlement, the financial manipulation that's been bleeding both families dry for the past 5 years, that's all Harrison. Mrs. Hale pointed at one of the documents. Sarah found bank records showing transfers to an account in Denver, Harrison's account. Thousands of dollars, all stolen from property sales that should have gone to the families or the territorial government. Cordelia felt cold spreading through her chest. If that's true, why would he push for this investigation? Why risk exposing himself? Because he's not trying to expose himself. He's trying to control the narrative, make sure the investigation stays focused on historical crimes while his recent theft stays hidden. And if that means sacrificing Elias Thorne or Calder Rourke or both, that's fine with him. Mrs. Hale's voice was bitter. Sarah was going to report him, was going to blow the whole thing open, so he killed her, made it look like the Thornes did it, and then he volunteered to lead the investigation, making sure it never got too close to the truth. Do you have proof? Sarah's original notes, bank records, forged signatures on transfer documents. Mrs. Hale pulled more papers from the basket. She hid them before she died, left them with me because she didn't trust anyone else. I've been too afraid to use them, but watching Marcus nearly burn to death last night made me realize fear doesn't protect us. It just lets evil keep happening. Cordelia spread the documents out, reading quickly. Bank transfers in Harrison's name, property deeds with signatures that didn't quite match the originals, a ledger showing systematic theft totaling over $50,000, and a letter from Sarah to Mrs. Hale explaining everything in case she didn't survive to testify. If we take this to his superiors, Cordelia began, his superiors are the people pressuring him to close this case quickly. They don't want a scandal. They want a conviction that makes them look good. Mrs. Hale gathered the papers. We can't trust the federal system. We can't trust the territorial government. We certainly can't trust local law enforcement, half of whom are on someone's payroll. Then what do? We do what Sarah should have done. We make it public. We bypass all the official channels and take it straight to the newspapers. Force exposure on people who want to keep this quiet. Mrs. Hale's eyes were hard. There's a reporter from San Francisco who's been investigating territorial corruption. I've already made contact. He's willing to publish everything if we can get him the evidence. That's dangerous. Everything's dangerous. At least this way we control the story instead of waiting for someone to control us. Cordelia looked at the evidence scattered across the bed, looked at Mrs. Hale standing there with determination etched into every line of her face, looked at the door where federal agents who might or might not be protecting her stood guard. She thought about Sarah Whitmore, trying to be the hero, trying to work within a system that was designed to protect itself, not deliver justice. She thought about Elias sitting in a cell for a murder he didn't commit. She thought about herself, trapped in a farmhouse with evidence that could either save her or sign her death warrant. How fast can you get this to San Francisco? She asked. Mrs. Hale smiled. There's a stage leaving at dawn. I can be on it. Then we do it. We publish everything. Expose Harrison. Expose Rourke. Expose the whole rotten system. Cordelia started gathering the documents. But we need insurance. We need to make sure that if anything happens to us, the evidence still gets out. Already handled. I made copies. Left them with 3 different people who have instructions to mail them if they don't hear from me by week's end. Mrs. Hale pulled the basket back onto her arm, now empty except for a small package wrapped in cloth. One more thing. This is for you. She handed Cordelia the package. Inside was a small derringer, 2-shot, with a box of ammunition. I don't know how to use this, Cordelia said. Point it at whatever you want dead and pull the trigger. If you're close enough, you don't need to be a good shot. Mrs. Hale moved toward the door. Harrison's going to figure out what we're doing eventually. When he does, he'll come for you. Don't wait around to explain yourself. Just run. Where? Anywhere that isn't here. Get to a town large enough that federal agents can't operate without witnesses. Telegraph ahead to that reporter in San Francisco. Make enough noise that killing you becomes more trouble than it's worth. That's not much of a plan. It's better than waiting here to die. Mrs. Hale opened the door, checked the hallway, then looked back. Sarah Whitmore was brave and principled and committed to justice, and it got her killed because she trusted the system to work. Don't make the same mistake. Sometimes survival means burning everything down and walking away from the ashes. She left before Cordelia could respond. Cordelia sat on the bed, surrounded by evidence of crimes that extended further than she'd imagined. The derringer felt heavy in her hand. 2 shots. 2 chances to defend herself against people who wanted her silent. She thought about Harrison sitting across from her this morning, playing the role of dedicated investigator while hiding his own guilt. How many times had he interviewed her? How many opportunities had he had to kill her quietly and make it look like an accident? He'd been waiting, watching, trying to figure out what she knew and how much danger she represented. Now he'd know. Once that evidence hit the newspapers, once Sarah's notes became public record, Harrison would have nothing left to lose. And men with nothing to lose were the most dangerous kind. She loaded the derringer with hands that barely shook. Then she hid it in her skirt pocket and lay down on the bed, fully dressed, waiting for whatever came next. It came at midnight. She heard the guard outside her door fall. A soft thump that might have been mistaken for nothing if she hadn't been listening for it. Then footsteps in the hallway. Quiet. Careful. Someone who knew how to move without being heard. Cordelia grabbed the derringer and pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The handle turned slowly. The door opened. Agent Harrison stepped into the room, a pistol in his hand. He saw the empty bed and froze. Cordelia pressed the derringer against the back of his head. "Don't move." To his credit, he didn't. He went very still, his finger easing away from the trigger of his own weapon. "Mrs. Thorne," he said quietly, "this isn't what it looks like." "It looks like you came to kill me." "I came to move you. There's been a development. The safe house is compromised." "You're lying." "I'm really not." His voice carried no inflection. "But I can see why you'd think that, given everything Mrs. Hale probably told you." So he knew. Of course he knew. He'd probably had people watching her the whole time. "Put your gun on the floor," Cordelia said. Slowly. He did, setting it down with careful precision. "Now step away from it." He moved 3 steps forward, hands raised. "We should talk." "We're done talking. You killed Sarah Whitmore. You've been stealing from both families. You're using this investigation to cover your own crimes. 2 out of 3. Not bad." He turned to face her, apparently unconcerned about the gun pointing at his chest. "I didn't kill Sarah. But yes, I've been embezzling. And yes, I'm using the investigation for cover. Sarah figured it out, confronted me. I tried to convince her to take a cut and stay quiet, but she was too damn principled. So you killed her." "So someone else killed her before I could figure out another solution." His expression was unreadable. "I've been trying to find out who for 18 months. That's the actual investigation I've been conducting. The murder charges against Elias? That's cover. Theater to keep the real killer complacent while I work." "I don't believe you." "You shouldn't. You shouldn't believe anyone in this situation, including me." He lowered his hand slightly. "But ask yourself, if I wanted you dead, why would I put you in a safe house with guards? Why not just let the fire take you? Why not let Rourke's people finish what they started?" "Because you need the documents I have. Need to know what I know before you eliminate me." "I already know what you know. I've been watching you since you arrived. I know you found the secret office. Know you took documents. Know you gave some to me and held others back. I know Mrs. Hale visited you tonight and left with evidence." He smiled without humor. "I even know about the derringer you're pointing at me right now. Checked serial numbers with local gunsmiths 3 hours ago." Cordelia's hand tightened on the weapon. "Then why aren't I already dead?" "Because you're more useful alive. Because you're smart enough to understand nuance. And because I think you're interested in the same thing I am. Finding out who actually killed Sarah Whitmore and making them pay for it." He sat down on the bed, moving slowly. "I've narrowed it to 3 suspects. Want to hear my theory? She should shoot him, should pull the trigger and deal with the consequences later. But curiosity was stronger than fear." "Talk," she said. Harrison leaned back against the wall, looking relaxed despite the gun still aimed at his center mass. Sarah's death benefited 3 people specifically. Whoever was threatened by her investigation, whoever wanted the Thorns destroyed, and whoever wanted to cover up crimes she'd discovered. That suggests 3 possible killers. Marcus Webb, representing Thorn interests, someone in Rourke's organization, or someone in territorial government who needed her silenced. "You're number 4 on that list." "I'm number 1 on that list if I'm being honest. But I didn't do it, which leaves the other 3. He pulled out his notebook, flipping through pages. "Marcus had motive and opportunity. He's killed before. He confessed to you, which either means he did it or he's covering for someone else. Rourke had agents in the house, including Porter, who we now know was feeding him information. And there's a territorial judge named Blackwood who's been on the Thorn payroll for 20 years and would have been ruined if Sarah's evidence became public. Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need your help. You're inside the Thorn organization. You have access to people who won't talk to me. And you're motivated to find the truth because your survival depends on it." He closed the notebook. "Work with me. Help me identify Sarah's real killer. In exchange, I'll make sure the embezzlement charges disappear and you walk away from this with enough money to start over somewhere safe. You're asking me to trust a federal agent who just admitted to systematic theft and corruption. I'm asking you to be pragmatic. You can try to expose me, which gets you killed. You can try to run, which gets you caught, or you can work with me to solve the actual murder, which gets you out alive and maybe even sees justice done." He stood slowly. "I'm not a good man, Mrs. Thorne, but I'm the best option you have right now, and deep down, you know it." The terrible thing was, he might be right. Cordelia kept the gun steady. "How do I know this isn't just another manipulation, another lie to keep me under control?" "You don't." Harrison picked up his own weapon from the floor, moving slowly enough that she could stop him if she wanted. He holstered it without pointing it at her. "But consider this. If I wanted you controlled, I'd have made you disappear the moment you became inconvenient. Instead, I've kept you alive, kept you protected, and now I'm offering you a partnership. That should tell you something." "It tells me you still need something from me." "Of course I do. I need access to the people who won't talk to federal agents. I need someone who can move through both the Thorne and Rourke camps without raising suspicion." He moved toward the door. "And I need someone smart enough to see the patterns I'm missing. Sarah was that person. Now she's dead. You're the replacement, whether you like it or not." "I'm not Sarah." "No, you're not. She was an idealist. You're a survivor. That makes you more useful." He paused at the threshold. "We leave at dawn, pack light, and keep that derringer loaded. Where we're going, you'll need it." "Where are we going?" "To talk to the one person who knows everything about what happened the night Sarah died. The person Marcus was protecting when he confessed." Harrison's expression darkened. "We're going to see Elias Thorne's brother." "Elias doesn't have a brother. He said he was the last one." "He said what he needed you to believe, but Daniel Thorne is very much alive, and he's been hiding in the mountains for 18 months, ever since the night Sarah Whitmore disappeared." Harrison left her standing there with more questions than answers. She heard him speaking to the guards outside, low voices discussing security protocols and watch rotations. Then silence. Cordelia sat on the bed, the derringer still in her hand, trying to make sense of everything. A brother Elias never mentioned. A federal agent who admitted to embezzlement but claimed innocence in murder. Mrs. Hale rushing evidence to San Francisco while telling her to run. And somewhere in all of this, a killer who'd successfully framed an innocent man for 18 months. She didn't sleep, just watched the window as night faded to gray dawn, waiting for Harrison to make good on his word or prove himself a liar. He arrived as the sun broke over the eastern ridge, driving a wagon that had seen better decades. Agent Cole sat beside him, looking unhappy about whatever assignment he'd been given. "Mrs. Thorne," Harrison called up to her window. "Time to go." She grabbed the small bag she'd packed, a change of clothes, the documents she'd saved, and the derringer hidden in the folds of her skirt. The guards didn't stop her as she left, didn't even look surprised. They'd been expecting this. Cole helped her into the wagon with mechanical courtesy. Up close, he looked exhausted, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "You look like hell," Cordelia said. "Feel worse." He settled into the back of the wagon, positioning himself where he could watch the road behind them. "Agent Harrison has a talent for making simple cases complicated. This was never simple. It was until you showed up." Harrison snapped the reins and the wagon lurched forward. They headed east, away from town, toward mountains that looked like broken teeth against the sky. The road deteriorated quickly from packed dirt to little more than a trail. Trees pressed in on both sides, dense enough to turn morning into twilight. "How far?" Cordelia asked. 6 hours if we're lucky. 8 if the trail's washed out from recent rain. Harrison kept his eyes on the path ahead. Daniel Thorne built himself a cabin about as far from civilization as you can get in this territory. He's been living off the land, seeing maybe 3 people a year. Why did he run? That's what we're going to find out. Harrison guided the wagon around a fallen log. What I know is this. Daniel was at the house the night Sarah disappeared. He and Marcus had an argument that got loud enough for the whole staff to hear. Next morning, Daniel was gone. Took his horse, his rifle, and whatever he could carry, left everything else behind. And Elias just let him go? Elias helped him go. Gave him supplies, money, a head start before anyone could ask questions. Harrison glanced at her. Brothers protect each other, even when they shouldn't. They rode in silence for an hour. The trail got worse, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses through sections too treacherous for the wagon. Cordelia's legs ached from the climb, her lungs burned in the thin mountain air, but she didn't complain. Complaining showed weakness, and she'd learned that weakness got you killed. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat cold rations that tasted like leather. Cole wandered off to scout ahead, leaving Cordelia alone with Harrison for the first time since the previous night. "Tell me about Sarah," she said. "The real version, not the official story." Harrison chewed slowly, considering his words. "She was good at her job. Too good, maybe. She went undercover as a mail-order bride, but somewhere along the way, she stopped pretending and started actually caring about the people she was supposed to be investigating. That's dangerous in this line of work." "Did she care about Elias?" "I think she pitied him, saw him as a victim of his father's sins instead of a perpetrator." He took a drink from his canteen. "She told me once that Elias reminded her of a dog that had been beaten so long it didn't know how to do anything but cower. She wanted to save him. But you didn't." "I wanted to use him. Build a case that would bring down the whole territorial corruption network. Sarah's way was cleaner, kinder. My way was more effective." He looked at her directly. "I'm not going to apologize for that. Sometimes justice requires sacrifice." "Is that what I am? A sacrifice? You're a complication I'm trying to turn into an asset." He stood, brushing dust from his pants. "If you survive this, you'll walk away with enough money to start over anywhere you want. If you don't survive, at least you'll have died for something more meaningful than a marriage contract." "That's a terrible comfort." "It's the only kind I have." Cole returned, shaking his head. "Trail's blocked about a mile ahead. Rock slide, recent. We'll have to go around, which adds another 3 hours." Harrison cursed under his breath. "We won't make it before dark. There's a hunter's shelter about 2 miles south. We could camp there, resume at first light." "No choice then." Harrison began repacking their supplies. "Let's move. I don't want to be on this trail after sunset." They reached the shelter as the last light was fading. It was barely a structure, 3 walls of stacked stone and a roof of branches that probably leaked. But it was shelter, and it had a fire pit that someone had used recently. "Someone's been here," Cole said, examining the ashes. "Within the last week." "Daniel?" Cordelia asked. "Or hunters? Or someone tracking us?" Harrison's hand went to his weapon. "Cole, set up a perimeter watch, 2-hour rotations. I'll take first shift." They ate more cold rations and tried to get comfortable on ground that felt like sleeping on rocks, because it was sleeping on rocks. Cordelia wrapped herself in a blanket that smelled of horse and old smoke, listening to the forest sounds around them. Owls, wind, the skitter of small animals in the underbrush. She must have dozed because she woke to voices. Low, urgent, male. She opened her eyes without moving, orienting herself. Harrison and Cole stood near the entrance, silhouetted against starlight. They were arguing about something, keeping their voices down but not down enough. "Can't trust her," Cole was saying. "She's been playing all sides since she got here. How do we know she's not working with Rourke? We don't, but we need her." Harrison's tone allowed no argument. "Daniel won't talk to federal agents. He won't talk to anyone connected to his family. But he might talk to his brother's wife, especially if she comes asking the right questions. And if she tells him we're investigating Elias, if she warns him, then we learn something useful about where his loyalties lie." Harrison shifted, looking back toward where Cordelia pretended to sleep. "She's smarter than both of us combined, Cole. Stop underestimating her." They fell silent. Cordelia waited 5 minutes, then 10, before opening her eyes again. Cole had moved off to take his watch rotation. Harrison sat near the fire, cleaning his pistol with methodical precision. "You can stop pretending," he said without looking at her. "I know you're awake." She sat up, the blanket falling away. "Does Cole always question your decisions?" "Only the questionable ones." Harrison held his pistol up to the firelight, checking the cylinder. "He's not wrong to distrust you. You haven't given anyone reason to trust you. Neither have you." "Fair point." He set the gun aside. "Want to know the truth about why I'm bringing you to see Daniel? I assume you're going to tell me regardless." "I think Daniel killed Sarah. I think he did it to protect his brother, and Marcus took the blame to protect him. Family loyalty runs deep with the Thorns." He poked at the fire, sending sparks spiraling up. "But I can't prove it. Can't even get close enough to Daniel to ask questions. Every time I send someone into these mountains, he disappears deeper. It's like trying to catch smoke." So you're using me as bait. I'm using you as a bridge. There's a difference. He looked at her finally. If Daniel did kill Sarah, he's been living with that guilt for 18 months. Guilt makes people confess, especially when someone they perceive as innocent asks the right questions. And if he didn't kill her, then we're back to Marcus or Rourke or someone we haven't considered yet, but at least we'll know. He added another stick to the fire. Either way, tomorrow changes everything. Be ready. She lay back down but didn't close her eyes. Above her, through the gaps in the makeshift roof, stars wheeled across a sky so clear it hurt to look at. She thought about Daniel Thorne, hiding in these mountains, carrying secrets that might destroy what was left of his family. She thought about Elias, sitting in a cell, protecting a brother who might be a murderer. She thought about herself, caught between people who all wanted something she wasn't sure she could give. Somewhere in the darkness, an animal screamed, something dying or something hunting. In these mountains, it was hard to tell the difference. Dawn came cold and gray. They broke camp quickly, eating nothing, speaking less. The trail improved slightly as they climbed, switching back on itself like a snake. By mid-morning, Cordelia's legs were trembling from exhaustion. "How much farther?" she asked. Harrison pointed to a ridge about a mile above them. "Just beyond that, if he's home. And if he's not, then we wait. He always comes back eventually." They crested the ridge and the cabin came into view. It was larger than she'd expected, a proper log structure with a stone chimney and windows that had actual glass. Smoke rose from the chimney in a thin line. "He's here," Cole said. "Want me to announce us?" "No. We go in quiet. If he runs, we'll never catch him." Harrison dismounted, gesturing for Cordelia to do the same. "You go first. Knock on the door. Tell him you're Elias's wife and you need to talk. Don't mention us until he lets you inside." "What if he doesn't let me inside?" "Then we find out how loyal he really is to his brother." Harrison pulled his rifle from the saddle scabbard. "But I don't think that'll be a problem. Curiosity alone will make him open that door." Cordelia approached the cabin with her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. Up close, she could see signs of habitation, firewood stacked neatly, a water barrel catching runoff from the roof, animal pelts stretched on frames to dry. This wasn't a hermit barely surviving. This was someone who'd built a life. She knocked. 3 times, firm and clear. Silence. Then movement inside. Footsteps approaching. The door opened 6 inches. A man's face appeared in the gap, younger than Elias, maybe 30, with the same dark eyes and strong features. But where Elias carried the weight of inherited guilt, this man looked haunted by something more immediate. "Who are you?" His voice was rough from disuse. "Cordelia Vance. I married your brother 3 days ago." She kept her hands visible, non-threatening. "I need to talk to you about Sarah Whitmore." His expression flickered. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Yes, you do. She was your brother's fiancée. She disappeared 18 months ago, and you left the same night she died. You should go." He started to close the door. "Federal agents are in the woods behind me," Cordelia said quickly. "They're going to arrest you for her murder unless you talk to me first. I'm trying to help you." The door stopped moving. Daniel Thorne stared at her through the gap, weighing truth against deception. Then he opened it wider. "Come in, but just you. Anyone else tries to follow, I put a bullet through the door." Cordelia glanced back toward where Harrison and Cole waited. Harrison gave a slight nod. She stepped inside. The cabin was sparse but clean. A bed in one corner. A table with 2 chairs. Shelves lined with books, more books than furniture. A rifle hung above the door within easy reach. Daniel moved to stand between her and the weapon. "How did you find me?" "Agent Harrison tracked you. He's been looking for 18 months. "Harrison?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's the federal agent? The one investigating my family?" "Among other things." Cordelia stayed near the door, ready to run if needed. "He thinks you killed Sarah. Marcus confessed to protect you. Your brother is sitting in jail for a murder he didn't commit." "Marcus didn't confess to protect me. He confessed because he's guilty." Daniel moved to the window, looking out at the forest. "I was there that night. I saw what happened, but I didn't kill her." "Then tell me who did." He was quiet for a long moment. "You married Elias. That makes you family, I suppose. Family deserves truth, even when truth destroys things." "I'm not interested in destroying anything. I'm interested in staying alive long enough to figure out what I walked into. That earned a bitter smile. At least you're honest about your motivations. Sarah pretended to care about justice, about doing the right thing, but she was just as self-interested as the rest of us. She just wrapped it in prettier language. You didn't like her. I didn't trust her. She was too perfect, too good at playing the role of frontier bride while asking questions that weren't innocent. He turned from the window. I told Marcus she was Pinkerton, told him we needed to get her out of the house before she found evidence that could hang all of us. He agreed, said he'd handle it quietly. Pay her off, send her east, make it look like she'd changed her mind about the marriage. But that's not what happened. No. That night she went into the secret office, found the ledgers, the kill records, everything. Marcus caught her there. They argued. She pulled a gun on him. Daniel's hands clenched at his sides. I heard the shouting and went down. By the time I got there, Marcus had disarmed her. He had her against the wall, telling her she was leaving tonight. No discussion. She spit in his face, told him she'd already sent copies of the evidence to her Pinkerton contacts, that it was too late to stop what was coming. And then? And then someone shot her. He met Cordelia's eyes. Not Marcus, not me. Someone else was in that passage, someone we didn't know was there. The shot came from the shadows near the entrance. She went down hard, bleeding from the chest. Marcus and I both drew our weapons, but whoever fired was already gone. Cordelia felt cold spreading through her chest. Who else knew about the passage? Anyone who'd lived in that house long enough. Mrs. Hale, the senior staff, Elias, obviously, my father before he died. Daniel moved closer. We carried Sarah's body upstairs, tried to save her, but the bullet had hit something vital. She died in less than 10 minutes. Marcus wanted to report it, said we should claim self-defense, that she'd pulled a weapon first. But I knew how it would look. Pinkerton agent dead in our house, shot with one of our guns, her investigation about to expose everything. We'd all hang. So you buried her? Marcus buried her. I wanted to turn myself in, confess to the shooting even though I didn't do it. But he told me to run, said he'd take responsibility. Said with his record, his reputation as the family enforcer, people would believe it. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. I've been up here 18 months, knowing my brother's covering for a murder neither of us committed. Knowing there's a killer in that house who's been walking free while Elias sits in jail. Cordelia moved to the table, needing to sit. Her legs were shaking. If you don't know who shot her, how do you know they're still in the house? Because Marcus told me. 3 months ago, he came up here. First time I'd seen him since that night. He looked terrible. Said the real killer had made contact with him. Told him to keep quiet or Elias would die too. Said they had leverage, proof that could destroy what was left of the family. What kind of leverage? Marcus didn't say, but he was scared. I've seen Marcus face down armed men without blinking, but whoever contacted him had him genuinely terrified. Daniel pulled out the other chair and sat across from her. He made me promise to stay hidden. Said if I came back, if I testified to what really happened, the killer would make good on their threats. And you've been up here ever since, trying to figure out how to save my brother without getting him killed. He rubbed his face. Then you show up saying you married him, another woman walking into that death trap. I thought maybe Elias had lost his mind completely. He was desperate, needed a wife to look stable, to attract investors, to buy time. Cordelia looked at Daniel directly. But he didn't tell me about you. Didn't mention having a brother at all. Why would he hide that? Because if anyone knew I was alive, they'd start asking where I was and why I left. Better for everyone to think the thorn line ended with him. Daniel stood abruptly. You need to leave Red Hollow, tonight, if possible. Get as far from that house as you can. The house burned down 2 nights ago. His expression went still. What? Someone set fire to the estate, nearly killed Marcus in the process, destroyed most of the evidence, including the ledgers Sarah found. Cordelia watched his reaction. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Who said it? A man named Porter, working for Rourke. At least that's the official story. But I'm starting to think everyone's working for someone else. The lines between sides are blurred to the point of meaninglessness. Daniel moved to the rifle above the door, taking it down and checking it was loaded. If the house burned, then the killer knows their leverage is gone. That makes them unpredictable, dangerous. hence the federal agents outside. They're not here to protect you. They're here to arrest me. He positioned himself by the window again, watching the tree line. How many? 2. Agent Harrison and Agent Cole. They think if I talk to you, you'll confess. Harrison. Daniel said the name like a curse. He was sleeping with Sarah. Did he tell you that? Cordelia felt the world shift slightly. No, he didn't mention that. They were lovers before she came to Red Hollow. He recruited her for the undercover assignment, sent her into our house, and continued their relationship in secret whenever he was in town. Daniel's voice was hard. She was supposed to report to him weekly, feed him information about our operations. But somewhere along the way, their relationship soured. I don't know the details, but Marcus said he saw them arguing in town about 3 weeks before she died. Heard Harrison threaten her. Threaten her how? Said if she didn't finish the job and get him the evidence he needed, he'd make sure everyone knew she was Pinkerton, blow her cover, and destroy her career. Daniel turned from the window. Harrison needed a conviction to advance his career, needed something big that would get him noticed in Washington. Sarah was his ticket, and when she started having second thoughts about destroying people she'd come to care about, he reminded her what was at stake. Cordelia's mind raced. Harrison had admitted to embezzlement but denied murder. But if he'd been sleeping with Sarah, if their relationship had gone bad, if she'd become a liability instead of an asset, the cabin door exploded inward. Harrison stood there with his rifle raised, Cole behind him with his pistol drawn, both weapons pointed at Daniel. Step away from the window, Harrison said calmly. Hands where I can see them. Daniel didn't move. She knows about you and Sarah, knows you were using her. How long before she figures out you killed her when she wouldn't play along anymore? I didn't kill her. Then who did? That's what I'm trying to find out, same as you. Harrison's rifle didn't waver. Now drop your weapon and come outside. You're under arrest for fleeing the scene of a crime and obstruction of a federal investigation. I'm not going anywhere with you. Daniel's hand tightened on his rifle. You want me dead? Same as whoever actually pulled that trigger. Convenient to tie up loose ends and call it justice. This doesn't have to end badly, Harrison said. Come peacefully. Testify to what you saw. Help me build a case against the real killer. Do that, and I'll make sure you walk away from this. Your promises aren't worth the breath you waste making them. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Cordelia stood frozen between them, hand moving unconsciously toward the derringer hidden in her skirt. Then Cole shifted slightly, and she saw something in his expression. Not the exhaustion she'd seen earlier. Something else. Something that looked almost like anticipation. Harrison, she said quietly, put the gun down. Mrs. Thorne, step away from him. It's not Daniel you should be worried about. She looked at Cole. It's your partner. Cole's expression didn't change, but his pistol shifted fractionally, away from Daniel, toward Harrison. Cordelia, what are you... Harrison began. Cole was in the house the night of the wedding, she said, words coming faster now as pieces clicked into place. I saw him in the hallway, assumed he was investigating with you, but you didn't arrive until after Elias was arrested. Cole was already there, already in position. I came early to secure the scene, Cole said. His voice was too calm. Standard procedure. You came early to make sure certain evidence was found and other evidence wasn't. You were the one who guided Rourke's people to Sarah's body. You told them exactly where to dig because you're the one who helped bury her there. Cordelia took a step back. Harrison thought you were following his orders, but you've been working for someone else this whole time. Cole smiled. It was a terrible thing to see. Took you long enough? He shot Harrison. The sound was deafening in the small cabin. Harrison went down hard, clutching his shoulder, his rifle clattering across the floor. Cole's pistol swung toward Daniel, but Daniel was already moving, diving behind the table as a second shot splintered wood where his head had been. Cordelia pulled the derringer, hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Don't move. Don't. Cole looked at her, at the small two-shot weapon she held, like it might explode in her hand. You gonna shoot me with that? You ever even fired a gun before? First time for everything. She kept the derringer trained on his chest, knowing she had 2 bullets and needed to make them count if this went bad. Here's what's going to happen, Cole said, his own weapon still pointed at where Daniel had taken cover. I'm going to kill Daniel. Then I'm going to kill Harrison. Then I'm going to make it look like they killed each other and you barely escaped. Tragic shootout in the mountains. Federal investigation ends with both primary suspects dead. Case closed. Who are you working for? Cordelia asked, stalling. Does it matter? He glanced at Harrison, who was trying to apply pressure to his shoulder wound with one hand while reaching for his fallen rifle with the other. Don't bother, Harrison. You're bleeding out. Be dead in 20 minutes if you're lucky. Blackwood, Harrison gasped. Judge Blackwood, you're his man. Always worse. Judge Blackwood pays better than the federal government, has longer reach too. Cole moved sideways, trying to get an angle on Daniel. Sarah found records that would have destroyed him, sent him to prison for life. So he paid me to make sure those records disappeared along with anyone who'd seen them. You shot her, Cordelia said. Shot her? Buried her. Kept quiet about it for 18 months while everyone else tore themselves apart trying to figure out who did it. He actually laughed. Easiest money I ever made. Just stand back, let stupid people destroy each other, and collect payment for doing nothing. Then why burn the house? Why destroy the evidence? Because Mrs. Hale was getting brave. Talking about going to newspapers. Blackwood needed everything gone before it could be published. Cole's finger tightened on the trigger. Now come out, Daniel. Make this easy. Or I shoot through the table until I hit something vital. You shoot him, I shoot you, Cordelia said. With that toy? You'll miss. And even if you don't, you've got 2 bullets against my 6. Math doesn't work in your favor. He was right. She knew he was right. But she kept the derringer raised anyway. Daniel made the decision for all of them. He came up from behind the table with his rifle already shouldered. The shot took Cole in the chest before he could pivot. Cole's return fire went wild, punching through the cabin wall. He stumbled backward, surprise written across his face, and collapsed against the doorframe. Should have taken the math seriously, Daniel said, working the lever to chamber another round. Cole tried to raise his pistol. Daniel shot him again. This time he stayed down. Cordelia stood there, the derringer still pointed at a dead man, her ears ringing from the gunshots. The cabin smelled like blood and gunpowder. Harrison was making wet, pained sounds as he tried to keep pressure on his wound. Help me, he gasped. Need to stop the bleeding. Daniel moved to him, ripping Harrison's jacket open to examine the wound. Bullet went through. Missed the artery, but you're still losing blood fast. Bandages in my saddlebag. Harrison's face was gray. Cole. Need to check Cole. Make sure he's dead, Cordelia said. She was surprised how steady her voice was. Very dead. She approached Cole's body anyway, kicking his pistol away before checking for a pulse she knew she wouldn't find. 2 shots to the chest from a hunting rifle at close range. Nobody survived that. She searched his pockets, finding a wallet with false identification papers, a money clip thick with cash, and a folded letter sealed with wax. She broke the seal and read it quickly. The letter was from Judge Blackwood, instructions to eliminate anyone with knowledge of his involvement in territorial land fraud. Sarah Whitmore, specifically named, Marcus Webb and Daniel Thorne, if they proved troublesome, and vague references to the federal investigator if Harrison became a liability. She handed it to Daniel, who read it while keeping pressure on Harrison's shoulder. This is signed, dated, specific enough to convict. Won't matter if we all die up here, Harrison said through clenched teeth. Need to get down the mountain. Need medical attention. You need a surgeon, which is hours away, even if we ride hard. Daniel looked at Cordelia. Can you drive a wagon? Well enough. Then we move now. Harrison rides in the back. I'll take point on horseback in case we run into trouble. He stood, already gathering supplies. Mrs. Thorne, there's a medical kit under my bed. Get it. She found the kit. Surprisingly well stocked for someone living in isolation. Bandages, surgical needles, bottles of clear liquid that might have been alcohol or medicine, or both. She brought it to Daniel, who used it to bind Harrison's wound properly. This will hold until we reach town, Daniel said, but you're going to be in serious pain. Already there, Harrison muttered. Just get me down this mountain. They loaded him into the wagon, his face the color of old paper. Cole's body they left where it fell. Dealing with the dead could wait until after they saved the living. Daniel saddled his horse, a sturdy mountain breed that looked capable of handling rough terrain. Stay close, he told Cordelia. If I signal, you stop. No questions. The ride down was a nightmare. The wagon jolted over every rock and rut, making Harrison cry out in pain despite clearly trying not to. Cordelia's hands cramped from gripping the reins, Her back ached from the constant tension of keeping the wagon steady. They were maybe 3 hours down when Daniel raised his hand. Stop signal. Cordelia pulled the wagon to a halt. What is it? Riders coming up the trail. He pulled his rifle. Could be nothing. Could be Blackwood's people coming to check on Cole. How many? Can't tell yet. But we're exposed here. No good cover. He looked at the wagon, at Harrison barely conscious in the back. If shooting starts, you run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Get Harrison to town and show them that letter. Understand? What about you? I've been dead for 18 months anyway. Won't make much difference if it becomes official. The riders came into view, 3 of them, moving fast. As they got closer, Cordelia recognized the lead horse, Marcus Webb, with Mrs. Hale and Annie riding behind him. Don't shoot, Cordelia called to Daniel. They're from the house.